Councilmember Richardson. Councilmember Robb.
Present.
Councilmember Roach.
Present.
Mayor Edmonds. 6 present, there's 4.
Okay, we expect Councilmember Richardson to please stand as you're able and face the flag for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
You can do whatever you want.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. For approval of the agenda.
I move.
So moved by Councilmember Sher, second by Councilmember Paul. Edits, updates, etc. for the agenda.
Okay, so I'd like to add this discussion about rescheduling November council meetings, please.
Maybe that is number.
So that's 6. Oh, it's already on there.
So today's communications, city attorney said we need to have a motion resolution since it's a regular meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
So number 6.
Okay. Councilmember Murdoch.
Yeah, I'd like to move, it's gonna screw up the numbering, but anyway, resolution number 3 to after the resolution we just
Yep.
did, so, and then to add the new resolution, proposed resolution that I passed around to the following.
Wait, following that or planning substitute number 3 to that?
No, we're going backwards, we'll have this resolution,
Okay.
before that we'll have legal services,
Okay.
and then we'll have okay, that's the way it was.
No, I was going to use it for that, but that's fine. Yeah, we can make it before the legal services.
I think it should go before.
Okay. So we'll just substitute that in at number 3 then. Okay, any other updates, changes to the agenda?
New resolution applying for 3 years now,
Yeah.
and the current 3 is in number 7.
Yep.
Except for number 6.
Number 6 is the state change. Okay, any other updates?
Question, where
Still there.
Still there.
Yeah,
I know where to go after we shuffle.
it's still
Number 5.
before the council dates and before the
Number 1 is approving appointment to boards and commissions. Number 2, escrow agreement. Number 3, the new resolution of development updates. Number 4, sustainability commission, working definition of sustainability. Number 5, recommendations from sustainability commission for sustainable development requirements. Number 6, council meeting dates. Number 7, the previous number 3, agreement with private professional services. Got it? Anything else? Agenda update? All in support of the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, introductions, who's here? Let me apologize, tell me, someone yell at me if I'm not speaking loudly enough. I have a fever right now, so don't feel great, and if I get quiet, I apologize, and I will hopefully make it through as long as I can, but if I don't, I'm sorry, but fever. So we have our police chief, Tony DeGiusti, Beth Ernest from our Economic Development Director, Dan Duchesne from the City Attorney's Office, Manager, City Manager McCleary, Deputy Clerk Andrew Kalenga, and I don't know if I saw any other staff in our audience, but thank you all for being here. So just as a note on what's coming up on the agenda this evening, we have audience participation coming up right now, and then again at the close of the meeting, we also have a public hearing. So if you're here to speak about the Ypsilanti Citizens Police Advisory Commission. We will have a public hearing about that coming up after a presentation from Ms. Erna, that follows audience participation. So generally, folks who are going to speak at a public hearing want to talk at that time. And audience participation is for more broad comments. So, audience participation is a chance for members of the audience to address us about any item they wish. We request and expect you to be respectful. You will come up and when your name is called, state your name and address for the record, and then your 3 minutes will start. When the beeper goes off, you need to end your comments so someone else has a chance to speak. We will start, and I will, after taking names from the list, take other hands from the audience for anyone else who would like to address council. If you do not wish to speak when I call your name, just say pass. Quinn Phillips?
I'm Quinn Phillips. I live in Ypsi. Feel free to correct me if I get any of this wrong. So the mayor pro tem, chief of police, and economic development director went on an all-expenses paid trip to Beijing and Shanghai, where they met with the proposed developers of International Village. Despite being asked to release all emails regarding the trip, no documentations or communications regarding the Shanghai portion have been released that I've seen. On her first day back from China, Mayor Edmonds officially stated, quote, "My understanding is since before departing was that her trip was funded through a scholarship the city delegation received from Wayne State University Chinese Students and Scholars Association, and that those funds originated from the Chinese consulate. If the investigation uncovers that not to be the case, I too have very serious concerns," end quote. The city has provided no evidence that the Chinese consulate was involved in this trip. The consulate denies funding this trip. On September 12th, 10 days before leaving for China, Mayor Edmonds received a LinkedIn message from a representative of the Wayne State Student Organization who claimed to be funding the trip. It stated, quote, "It's worth noting that these scholarships," the quotes were in the original message, "are mainly funds from a company called Global Capital LLC based out of Michigan," end quote. Mayor Edmonds was informed at the presentation to council on the 19th that Global Capital LLC is the developer. It's Amy Shu Foster's company. It is also in Amy Foster's email signature, which she used to communicate with the mayor prior to the trip. The mayor may not have checked the message before leaving for China, which she still has not provided evidence of, but she certainly read it before telling council under oath that she didn't have evidence the developer paid for the trip. At this point, the email chain linking the airline tickets from Amy Foster to the construction contractor, then to our city's economic development director, had been released. The mayor had also been provided with emails where Beth Ernett seemingly deleted evidence that Amy Foster originally sent the plane tickets. Amy Shu Foster sent Beth Ernett the award letter from the Wayne State scholarships. Why was the award letter dated September 6th when the tickets were sent from Amy Foster on September 5th? Why didn't someone from Wayne State send the letter and the check directly to the city? Why was Wayne State in contact with the developer if the developer wasn't paying for the trip? How did Wayne State find out that council needed money for the trip to China? Where are the documents proving that Beth Ernett contacted any organizations in search of funding? Where's the invoice showing where they reached the $16,000 figure for the cost of the trip? Why is there only a cashier's check documenting the path of the money? Why did the Wayne State Dean of Students tell the press, quote, "We checked both accounts for this organization. They do not have funds that they would have had to be able to pay for this kind of travel. Historically, there wasn't a big deposit or withdrawal either." Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Napie?
I feel like a regular here. Brian Napie, 6180 First Road, Superior Township, representing the Friends of Penn Park, which is a group of about 30 citizens who are based in Ypsilanti Township, and Superior Township. I just wanted to inform everyone of the latest progress that the Friends of Penn Park has made in analyzing the statement of work and also the sediment analysis data that was provided to us by the Huron River Watershed Council on samples that were taken from the sediment of the Huron River in August of 2013. It is the desire of the Friends of Penn Park to be helpful and to contribute in a positive way to allow the city of Ypsilanti and your leadership to determine whether it makes sense to remove the dam and understand the total cost of removal, or to repair the dam. And so we've studied the statement of work, and we have found that as proposed, the statement of work is inadequate, but the options that are in the statement of work that are listed as options of task 1, and several of the options in task 3, and a few of the options in task 4, if completed, would provide that information to council. And we've shared to Manager McClary our memo of the details, and we will be having a meeting with him and Laura Rubin to discuss this on Thursday, and each of you will have a memorandum with the details. Now, on the sediment analysis, this is really an important one. 6 samples were taken up to about a mile from the dam head. At the dam head, 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, so on. At the sample at the dam head, we found evidence of 4 heavy metals at concentrations that were probable effect concentrations. Lead, mercury, chromium, this kind of thing. And at 0.2 miles, they had 6 heavy metals that were at threshold concentrations, which is not as bad as probable effect concentrations, but it appears that near the dam head, heavy metal contamination is significant. It needs to be looked at in the sediment. Furthermore, and interestingly, at 0.6 miles from the dam head, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, 7 of those have been found, 6 at possible effect concentration. These are like anthracene, polyanthrazine, these kind of compounds, all human carcinogens. And then interestingly, at 0.4 and 0.72 miles, on either side, they have high concentrations above thresholds of these polyaromatic hydrocarbons, but not as high as 0.6. Now, when we looked at the, so I will just say that we shared this information with the group, and we're happy to be contributing in a positive way. But the pollution is something to worry about.
Thank you, Mr. Apey. Appreciate it. Daniel Romero?
Hey everyone, I'm Nathaniel Romero. I live in Ypsilanti. Looks like we have a pretty jam-packed meeting tonight with lots of things to discuss. I'm pretty tired, and I know that a lot of y'all are pretty tired, and but I plan to be here throughout the meeting. So let me think. So I think what I see going on with this whole international village is 2 fundamentally competing visions of what good governance is. So, my idea, and I feel that a lot of my peers here, view that good governance involves robustly participatory processes. And the feeling is that with International Village is that this wasn't the case. And I noticed that there was a resolution that was set to be on the, or a recommendation from the Sustainability Commission that was set to be on the agenda today that was removed. And this reminds me of something that happened a month and a half ago with the Human Relations Commission. But this was a resolution to delay the International Village Purchase Agreement by 3 months and to set in a process to remediate the process using a community mediator and stuff like that. I'm disappointed to see that not there because I do feel that there's a participatory deficit going on right here. And I feel that that's problematic. Now I understand that the mayor and staff may feel that the International Village process has been on the up and up. And I feel that they probably believe this because this follows perhaps maybe some institutional best practices, has and this is making me think about the China trip. I heard last week that the trip was motivated because the MEDC and Spark and all these people thought that it was a good idea. But I want to say that that vision of governance is one that is fundamentally opposed to what me and my peers want. This is a non-participatory vision of governance that's based on technocratic expertise and and established best practices and institutional norms. But many of us feel that these institutions, like MEDC, Spark, are part of this gentrifying machine that we're just not down with. And we would much rather put in a participatory process that allows everybody to have a say in what's going on. And I do fundamentally believe that there are competing, fundamentally clashing visions of what good governance is. And we need to basically scrap International Village and put in better processes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Katie Clark. I live in Ypsilanti. I just wanted to talk about the fact that I'm really concerned that council has not taken any kind of firm stance against the international development yet, and that we're continuing to talk about the China trip in terms of how we might glean information from that trip that is relevant to the development proceeding. I understand that public comment is not intended to be a back and forth between council or for you to answer questions, but a question that I'd like to plant that I hope that you'll answer at some point and talk about amongst yourselves is what you need to see in order for this development to be in your mind a bad idea. Because from a lot of people's perspectives, we have quite enough information to understand that this development is a bad idea. I can go over some of that information now. So first of all, the proposed development site is a documented burial ground for indigenous people, and that has not been studied in any way. There has been no historical preservation effort. A lot of the public opinion is strongly opposed. The development team clearly has ideas that are really incongruent with the current culture of Ypsi and what a lot of people here want. The proposed housing is not affordable for the people that live here. The team themselves did not listen to public comment at the purchase agreement meeting and were on their phones while people were speaking. They don't care about public input. The developer does not have a CV for this job. She's been sued in the past. She knowingly violated our city ethic code by funneling money for the trip through the student group at Wayne State, regardless of who in council or city government knew what when. It seems really clear that at least the developer knew what she was doing, so not sure why we want to continue to work with her. The funding source, the EB-5 visas, is really ripe with a lot of controversy. We've seen a lot of people point out that there's no way to distinguish whether the money for these visas is coming from things like human trafficking or not. There was the bait and switch with the tax credits. There's the rush timeline that it sounds like even a lot of people on council are not happy with. The fact that we don't have a CBO or a CBA, I'm not sure if I missed anything else, but that's like quite a bit of evidence that it's not the right development or that it's not the right timeline or that something's wrong and that it's not the best choice to proceed. So it's really astounding from the perspective of a constituent to watch council continue to take this idea seriously when all of this evidence is stacked up to show that it's a really bad idea and we need to get out. So it's really not clear, I think, to me and to a lot of people sort of where your hard line is. It seems like this has been a done deal from the beginning. You know, that was the issue when people found out that you had tickets to China before even having a public hearing about it, and everything that's happened since then has sort of just reinforced that this has been a done deal from the beginning and that public comment and public input isn't being taken seriously, and it's kind of your job to represent us, so.
Lou, Kyle Hunter, for Ypsilanti. I'm not going to take up too many minutes. I'm just going to read a message between myself and Nicole Brown after the purchase agreement hearing. So this is dated September 20th, 9:07 a.m. This is for me. Wow. Just wow. And then September 21st, 9:12 a.m. This is from Nicole Brown. I get that you may not agree with my decision, but my reasoning was for further exploration, as I do and many other community members feel that this development would be viable if negotiated correctly. If our recommendations are not heeded or we do not come to agreement that is best for our city, this development will not have my support in the next phase. To have shut it down on Tuesday would have left no room for change or discussion. And again, I understand that you and others may not agree, and I take no issue with that. I respect that. This is my response. September 21st, 9:30 a.m. I take issue with there being no transparency on the China trip and no clear information on who funded the trip. The public deserved better than that, and council did not respect the community's overwhelming opposition to moving forward with the purchase agreement. It wasn't your decision to make, it was theirs, and they were ignored blatantly, which I do not respect, especially in light of all the behind-the-scenes pushback from a mandate in particular towards having the special hearing on the 18th. I find her to be culturally incompetent and overconfident in her ability to perform basic duties related to informing members of Ward 1 on these matters. As I said before, I question her motives and allegiances, not to mention her telling Commissioner Gaines she was going to vote yes regardless prior to the hearing on the 19th. Seems like the money had already just decided for her. What was your reason for not being upfront about the trip and its potential impact on your decision-making process, and who is funding your trip? I haven't gotten a response. I would like one tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Amber, fellows 300 Jarvis. So I'm just very angry at this point, but I'm going to funnel it as much as I can. This is a 5-minute speech, but we'll chop it up. So first question, why haven't you fired any staff yet? Seems like there's a lot of misleading going on under oath, which should be grounds to cut ties with staff that cannot produce clear answers to simple questions. Their continued presence on staff is compromising the city of Ypsilanti and our ability to gain trust back from the residents. I did hear about Mayor Edmonds' statement yesterday in which he took zero accountability for what's been more and more known in our community as a failure of due diligence, and if true, at minimum, a profound lack of oversight. Instead of offering an apology, Mayor Edmonds wrote a Facebook post as if nothing is happening in our town other than the great win-win things she learned on her cultural tour, which, as many have pointed out, was an all-expenses paid vacation by the developer, which was illegal and continues to be an unethical and illegal trip. So frankly, I'm insulted that you would even think most of Ypsilanti would be interested in this report back that's planned for today. I'm not interested. Like it's been said many times before, the process of International Village has been so terrible, it cannot possibly go on, and it can't be remediated. The fact that our mayor is ignoring the constituency's concerns further underscores an incompetence and lack of accountability, which seems to me to be indicative of someone putting up ideological blinders and steaming ahead for their own personal goals. And no, the friends in your insulated world that whisper quiet support in your ear are not adequately representative of your constituency. We are out here, please listen. At this point, it seems clear that the ship is sinking. So now I'm wondering, why aren't more councilors taking a definitive stance on International Village? Are you prepared to go down with this sinking ship? It seems clear that Mayor Edmonds does not have any real interest in re-election at this point. But what about my reps in Ward 3? I'm concerned that you're all twisting in the wind, waiting for the time to pass, and somehow this will all be okay. I'm here to say that it's not okay with me. I'm growingly disappointed in your lack of advocacy to fight for your constituents. I voted for you both, and since bribes are a new normal in our town, here's my simple bribe. Whatever you do between now and December, I'll remember next year in 2020 if I can afford to still live here. I've heard that one of my reps, Councilor Rob, said at a recent town hall that we would be naive to believe that developers would not be dishonest with us. I work at Ford, and this stuff happens. So I want to ask my rep, do you think it's adequate to compare the public lands of Ypsilanti to your job at Ford? It's not an adequate comparison. My response to that is, this is total narrative spin. You would not have said that a month ago. This is an attempt to hold on to the changing rules of the game. In fact, in written record on September 27th, quote, "It's very disappointing to learn that the trip to China wasn't properly vetted," Councilmember Brian Robb said to Metro Times. "The optics of the trip occurring 2 days after the vote weren't very good to begin with. This only confirms our worst fears and raises a whole new set of questions." So 20 days ago, it was confirmation of our worst fears, and now it's, of course, they're dishonest with us.
Erica Mooney?
Hi, Erica Mooney, I live in Ipsy. I'm here tonight because I want to reiterate and echo a point that Nathaniel brought up about good governance from the perspective that I've come to want to have happen is robust participation. And you might say that if you're for International Village, that with any development process, that public input meetings that could involve participatory design come later. But I've experienced some of those in my short time being involved in a number of plans and developments, and it seems like at that point, pretty much 90 to 99% of the decisions have already been made, and there's maybe like cosmetic things or solar panels or very small changes that can happen. So just here to say that I'm not really interested in furthering the process with International Village, but I am interested in furthering the process of a community benefits ordinance and building a coalition, because if International Village developers see that Ypsilanti is so valuable, that our public land along the Huron River is so valuable, they're one, not going to be the only people, and two, catalyzing Ypsilanti residents to see that as well, and also offering us an opportunity to bring together the energy that's coming forward from this, from everyone who's here tonight, everyone who was here a month ago, 2 weeks ago, in order to actually design a participatory process. Now, if you look at the metrics from our climate action plan and the goals that are stated in your yearly council goal and the master plan, all of those usually maybe kind of inform what we're talking about in a presentation or how we present to a developer, but they really kind of are just plans that sit on a shelf. Now, there's really proactive ways to actually take the citizen action coalition that would come out of a community benefits ordinance that would really, from the ordinance, just exist to convene the agreements groups that would determine each agreement. But if you were to combine that coalition with actually implementing the plans, you would have like direct and two-way communication between citizens that would be organized based on geography or issue area and tapping into all the good people in the city who are doing good things. Also, just for the record, this is not a new idea. I've actually presented this idea before to Amanda and two other people 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I think it's time for us to really proactively engage other groups that are already doing good work in the process of development and planning, because there's tons of opportunities for federal grants, and I know that it's like, oh, that takes so much time and y'all are overworked and understaffed, and I get that. I've worked in City Hall, I respect that, and I also understand that if you were able to delegate and trust and facilitate a process that actually empowers people who are willing to do the work in a way, you could create a robust participatory process and none of this would happen, and y'all would have less work to do.
Hi, I'm Ray and I live in Ypsilanti, and I want to say I completely agree with everyone that's spoken about International Village so far. I second all of their concerns. I want to speak on something a little bit different tonight. Something incredible has happened, and I hope I can get through this without crying, because this is really near and dear to my heart. This is made the news yesterday, Tuesday, October 17th, 2017, out of Portland, Oregon. This is a news report from K2, Channel 2 on your side. I used to live out there. This is one of the main news channels. It says, Portland will allow overnight parking for RVs and tiny homes on private property. I'm sorry. It's hard when you're scared about where you're going to live because you can't afford it anymore. And I know you all are homeowners. And the rents, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, Portland, Oregon, stay or go. It's a never-ending debate when RVs and tiny homes start popping up in the neighborhood. But it's a different story when one of them belongs to someone you know. A member of the Salt and Light Lutheran Levin community found herself in that exact situation, and church members didn't know how to help. She had been houseless for 8 months, and so here was an opportunity to have a place to stay, yet she can't stay here legally, said Lavetta Gilmore Jones, a co-director of Levin Community. By law, the woman couldn't stay in someone's yard even with permission in her RV. If we call ourselves a sanctuary city, yet we don't make provisions for people to live here, there's something wrong here, right? Said Gilmore Jones. Gilmore Jones and her colleagues took up the issue with the city to suspend enforcement. City Commissioner Chloe Udali agreed. I'm sorry. The charge was announced by Udali, who oversees the Bureau of Development Services. Previously, city code allowed for camping in parking lots of nonprofits and churches. The new policy allows people to park up to 3 tiny houses or RVs in parking lots of businesses, religious institutions, and government buildings, and 1 vehicle in the parking spot of private residences. Housing is a basic need and human right, Udali said Monday. We have failed to keep up with demand for decades. As the city commissioner with responsibility for the Bureau of Development Services, which enforces local building codes, I have asked the Bureau to deprioritize enforcement against tiny homes and people sleeping in RVs parked on private property, effective immediately. We need places to live, we need more options. Commissioner Udali issued the guidelines for the changes and how they would be applied to different situations. Parking lots of non-residential occupied structures, religious institutions, and businesses. Property owner may grant permission for up to 3 vehicles, a vehicle, motorhome, camper, trailer for sleeping. Properties with single-family structures or duplexes. Property owner and tenant may grant permission for 1 vehicle for sleeping. Vehicles must be located in legal parking areas on the property. I've already sent this to some of you, I'm gonna send it to the rest of you, thank you.
Ray. Good evening, you say your full name and address for the record.
My name is Amy Schroeds, and I live in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I would just like to thank you guys for being here tonight and echo something that Mayor Edmonds, I heard you say at the beginning before the public comment session, which that you were requesting and expecting us to be respectful. And so one thing I'd like to point out in my public comments is that 3 days before you left for your trip, myself and other constituents went on record to warn you that what you were doing with the trip was looking very concerning and potentially illegal, and we were not heard. So I feel like that is being directly disrespectful to your constituents. And so I'm just wondering, when the public comments asking the mayor and the council to consider the funding of the trips 3 days before the trip, why was that not concerned? Why was that not something that was mentioned even at the last city council meeting, or even at the investigation? Why the public comments before even the city council meeting were not heard, or any one of the council members took it into their hands to be like, why don't we know more about this trip? It's also concerning to me that the EB-5 visa scandals across the country are not being researched more by council, according to what I've heard from all the presentations thus far. I'm just wondering if this developer is willing to knowingly violate the city ethic code. What else are they violating, and where is this money coming from? And if we're going to involve 280 potential EB-5 visa holders in this project, do they have the staffing to support the research behind that? Does the city feel equipped to handle the research behind that? So those are the comments I'd like to pose to council tonight. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. That's all I have. Check out if anyone else wants to address council at this time.
Good evening, Mayor, Council staff, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilperson Richardson. I noticed on the agenda there's on there about the Police Citizens Commission. I think that's a great idea. There's one thing I can say about the City of Ypsilanti Police Department from interacting on both the professional and on the citizen level, is that they're a pretty good, pretty fair police department, right? But with this international village coming on in here right now, we're already experiencing gentrification, and it's affecting our community right now. Where I live in Ainsworth Circle, and I've been living there all my life. And we're seeing a whole bunch of people who from out of the area moving in, but we're also seeing a lot of people displaced. And they're just moving in and out, just keep back and forth with nowhere to go. If you go outside when you leave this meeting, you go down by the bus station right now, and you see tens of people homeless, they have nowhere to go. One of the things I suggested, whether I'm for or against the International Village, have you done a crime study? Because as we begin to see homeless start to increase more and more, you're going to see an elevation in crime. You're going to see property break-ins. You're going to see robberies. It's going to happen, right? I'm not sure, because I haven't heard, has there been a crime study that's going on as you start seeing people displaced? Because you're going to start seeing strange people showing up in your neighborhood, third ward, people that you're not used to seeing hanging around because they have nowhere else to go. And what's going to start happening is that's going to start having to get police complaints from people who have been here all the time. Then all of a sudden you're going to have police officers who are not familiar with the culture, right? Because even though that the police department, in my opinion, is very good, there are not very many black police officers. And a lot of people come from out of the area who work for the city of Ypsilanti, and as that begins to increase, you're going to start having conflicts more and more. And then it's going to start escalating. What's going to happen is pretty soon, there's going to come a push to a shove, and an officer who's not familiar with the community and the culture is going to do what we've been seeing going all around this United States right now. You're going to have a Ferguson type situation. So I encourage, one of the things I said was, whether I'm for or against International Village, slow down. Take a look at what's really going on. And I heard you mentioned it, Councilperson Richardson, is that the community benefits agreement, that has to be in place. It has to be. This is why we said, slow down, y'all going too fast. And get some public input. Invite us in, let us know what's going on. This backup, or what you want to call it, or force, is because of one thing. Nobody is communicating with us and letting the citizens know what's going on. Thank you.
Good evening, Council, Attorney, City staff, and friends. Here from the Friends of Peninsula Park Group, and just want to reiterate again that we are willing to work with the city, want to work with the city, and just want to state this, that when the pool was going under, the city rallied around that and allowed that community to make that decision, and we raised funds for that. When the Freight House was going down, similar. That community was able to step up and raise funds for that and make that decision. And that's all we're asking for this community, excuse me, is that with the dam, that community should be allowed to make that decision. Thank you.
John West, 1111 West Clark in the city. I'm really here tonight, unlike my previous visits, to talk about some of the discussions gone on about Water Street. And I'd like to focus on the comments people make about getting something else in there. I almost cried when I heard that we had sold the corner lot to Family Dollar. What a shame. We can't have people in there that have new construction with the tax rates that we have. We built a new home 28 years ago with new construction, and we swallowed really hard because it cost a lot more for that house than if I had built it somewhere else. But we lucked out and we got on the river. We have to have a project with a hook, and EB5 was the hook. The first time I heard the proposal coming down for International Village, I thought, well, they'll just go the way everybody else did, because it won't work. They'll crunch the numbers, the tax rate, we have the second highest in the state. When I tell our Ann Arbor friends, they say, oh no, Ann Arbor's higher. No, Ypsilanti's higher, but have a lower base. And they need that money to run the government, and we almost went under if we hadn't voted that Water Street. And it's too bad we turned down the income tax. I certainly pushed for it because that could have allowed us some breathing room in Water Street. Fortunately, we also passed the most recent one. But new construction is almost non-existent in the city because the tax base kills it. And you have to have a project that has a hook. This project has a hook. I doubt you'll find another one. We haven't in 15 years, and they just go down. I can't offer any advice about how you treat the conflict of interest coming down, but from a project standpoint, you need a project with a hook. And this, unfortunately, because of other issues, has that hook. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to address council?
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm kind of the other side. I think we need this project. I think, I know the city council people here, you know your wards. You know the people in your wards, you know how they think. I think this is a kind of a noisy minority who are against the International Village, but I also know that Pete and Brian and Lois, you know your people. You know what they really think. You know them by house, you know them by name. And I think there's a large number of property owners, just like the gentleman who spoke, who really need something like this at Water Street, and I don't think we're going to see too many opportunities. Our police department's at its minimum strength. Our Community and Economic Development is, I don't know how many, 1, 2, maybe 2.5, 3 people. We don't have any, our fire department, we have to do, what's it called, community aid or mutual aid or something every time there's a fire. We have 2.5 or 3 broken fire trucks. We need tax base. We should get everything we can for that property. I wouldn't even care if we put in $100 million condos down there. Anything that's going to generate tax for our tax base, that will help us get the services we need, that gives us the options to do the other things we need to do in our city with maybe affordable housing areas or anything else. We have no options right now. We have no money. And this is our best piece of property. We need to be respectful. We need to be professional. We need to do our homework. But we need to go and really pursue this with all resources that we can. And we shouldn't be afraid to call in the county, call in the state, call in the feds, federal people, call in Congressman Dingell. Get the help so we can do this right. Do the proper research. I don't have a problem with making sure we cross all the T's and dot all the I's and do all the background checks, but we don't have the staff, so we got to get help. But we need it. This is a realistic thing, and I'm saying it because I don't know yet. You know what your people think. Then we need to go after it. We need to go after this, and I think that from the people I talk to who own properties and own businesses, they want to see you go after this and do it right. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But if it works out, then that's really going to help our city go forward and will give us a lot of other options to do the kind of things that everybody in the city would like to see us do. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Desiree Simmons, 407 Charles Street. I am a homeowner, and I agree with everything this young gentleman said about the fact that we have a property that has a lot of value, and we should get the most that we can from it, and we should do it right. I'm not seeing that that's happening. We're talking about asking questions. We haven't had time to do so. I have started doing talks in neighborhood, trying to just have people hosting conversations about International Village to see what is it that people want. It's not about thinking you know what your neighbors want, it's about talking to them directly. So here are just a few notes from the most recent meeting I had, mostly with homeowners also. Some questions that they had for council. What have we already tried? Who can pay for these apartments? Has there been a market feasibility study? Does this count as a Superfund site? These are EPA designations. Whose job is it to do due diligence? Is there possibilities for natural rehabilitation? Could it make the process easier or cheaper down the line? What are some available grants? Here are some things that they want from a process. They want to be whatever development to be integrated into the community for the people who move there to add fabric to our community because we love our community. They want a process that asks the community what they want. They want a process that uses assets of the community members to work to do some of the due diligence or to try to fill in some of the gaps where folks don't have the time to do the work because it's already happening. They want more transparency. They want a holistic process that looks at all of the different properties we have and to have an actual strategic plan for what you might want to build. We should be seen as an asset to this community and to any process for development. We are not so large that we can't have a better process than what is considered the norm or best practice. We can see from other places around this country what things look like when we do that. I moved here from living in Boston and Chicago and Cleveland, and I've seen what kind of things these kind of developments do to cities even that large. So think about what it will do here. Raising prices for some of our small businesses to not be able to afford their spaces in downtown. We haven't talked about what that raising rents it will do for them too. If others are interested in participating in any of these community conversations, these are not all people who are thinking one way or another, but we should be part of the conversation. You can reach out to me, again, Desiree Simmons. If you want to host or participate, I'm happy to help do this around all the different wards of this city. This has energized me. This is my first time in the city council chambers, and I have been working. I have an 8-month-old daughter. I'm working full-time at the University of Michigan, and I'm coming here nights, working on weekends on this issue. We should be seen as an asset. Thank you.
I'll close this round of audience participation. And I think we're going to see a presentation I'll respond to one question that came up from Quinn. We were in Shanghai for like less than 24 hours. We went there, on a long train ride, saw some example housing and new developments. That's why we went there, and we saw a lot of kind of traffic getting to and from the train station, and then left and went back to Beijing.
Are you under oath?
For 3 days.
Are you under oath?
Thank you.
Are you under oath? Then it doesn't matter.
I'm responding
Doesn't matter.
where we were when.
Doesn't matter.
So that was just a specific
Okay,
question.
all right, cool.
Any other comments from anyone else in the council on this time?
I would just say to Desiree, I admire what you're doing with your community. I think that's amazing. I would suggest taking a look at the master plan that the city has. A lot of, that was a project that we did with, just 4 years ago, and it involved hundreds and hundreds of people from across every neighborhood of the city. And the work that we're doing, that we're considering for Water Street at this time does fit the master plan. But I would take a look at that, because you might see some of what you're hearing and some of what we're doing out there. So, but I commend the work you're doing. It's amazing.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move in a presentation for Ms. Ernest.
Good evening. Yeah. I will start by apologizing. I'm not the best photographer.
Could we please turn that row of lights off over there, please? Thank you. As you know, on September 21st, 2 staff members, 2 city council members embarked on a cultural and business trip to China in order to meet with developers and potential investors. During the 10 days of travel in China, we were able to meet with several potential investors and partner development companies. The first meeting with potential investors included business leaders, corporate leaders, and interested parties. City officials were asked to speak about the city of Ypsilanti. Although most communication did require the use of a translator, the general demeanor was positive and curious about our community. The business leaders were seeking opportunities for foreign expansion. Most of those businesses that we met with already had U.S. businesses, either on the East Coast or the West Coast. Most people were not familiar with the Great Midwest or the Great Lakes. So we took a lot of opportunity to speak, hold there for a second here. Took a lot of opportunity to speak about the access and transportation and availability of the Midwest and the Midwest manufacturing that's within the region. So that was a pretty decent interest, as well as one thing that continues to be a highlight or discussion point with foreign individuals is our recreation opportunities. So in traveling to China, we were able to see why recreation opportunities are such a grand asset. Being in the Beijing area and primarily urban populated areas, the cities have taken great lengths to include green features and to include parklands, but no area that we were in had the open park and recreational opportunities that we have, where you could bring your kayak down and hop on a river, or where you could take your dog and walk for miles on end. So that continues to be a major point of interest in our location and being in Michigan. The climates are very similar. China, Beijing specifically sits around the same parallel that we sit. So the climate, our weather patterns are very similar. We do get more snow in Michigan. but there is snow in the Beijing region, and there also is the highs and lows. So, you know, again, there's not a big climate to overcome. We talked a lot about major shipping routes, the Great Lakes. Business leaders, going back a little bit, business leaders had invited us to a typical Mongolian dinner and entertainment. We were able to meet with those leaders as well as representatives from Wangkou Development, which is a major partner with International Village. During those conversations, we were able to discuss our concerns with compatibility to the area, the incorporation of our historic district, and the need to provide a connective development between downtown and Depot Town and our entertainment districts. Through those discussions, we were able to set up tours for later in the trip. We were also, trying to skip around a little bit, we were able to meet with the project architects at the time, which is Little Diversified Architecture. Little has offices in Beijing, Shanghai, and North Carolina. The Little team has traveled to China, had traveled the same week to China as we had, as it was Design Week in Beijing, and they were receiving an award and giving presentations. The architects from Little discuss and listen to our concerns about development and the need to connect the development with the city of Ypsilanti. They suggested scheduling design charrettes in the community as soon as possible to better understand the needs and the designs of the community. You want to go ahead? Hold on, excuse me 1 second, I'm sorry. So skipping forward a little bit, and I'll come back and forth to some of the pictures, but we traveled to both Ningbo and Shanghai. During this travel, we used the bullet train. The train travels approximately 300 kilometers an hour, about 190 miles an hour. Being a former Chicagoan, I was endearly impressed that the train doesn't move. You don't feel the speed. The train was smoother than any airplane, train, or bus I've ever ridden on. It was definitely an alternative to flying. It was more economic as well as it was more eco-friendly to use the train. And by taking the train, we were able to see the farmland, we were able to see the industry throughout the 4-hour travel from Beijing to Ningbo. Go ahead, Goodman. So in getting, this is actually in Shanghai, and I have 2 different reports I'm working off of here. This is Wangkou's office, one of their corporate offices, and what's being shown is their most recent development that they did in Shanghai. The development is obviously much larger scale than Ypsilanti, but what we were able to see was the smaller scale, and this development includes 3 types of housing. It starts with student housing that is 800 square feet, goes into about 1,000 square feet into young professional housing, and then it goes up further to young professional established housing and as well as professional housing.
Some of it was smaller. Some of it was...
About 600, I'm sorry, yeah.
Like 400, even some 400 or 600 places, even other places were like 300, they're like micro apartments.
These were the little bit larger in Shanghai. So there'll be a couple more pictures of those coming up if you want to go forward, Andrew. So throughout meetings and business engagements, major takeaways were, meetings were set up with 2 very different business communities. We were able to meet with Chamber of Commerce representatives, as well as foreign ministry representatives to promote business opportunity as part of development in Ypsilanti. Businesses seeking expansion and relocation attended, as well as EB5 investors from the business sector. Staff and elected officials provided information on the city and answered questions about the city and greater region. Again, we were able to meet with the Chinese development partner, Wanku. Staff and elected officials toured corporate offices of Wanku and met with foreign and domestic teams with Little Diversified Architecture. And go forward. Presentations were made by the mayor pro tem, myself, and the police chief at business meetings and dinners. The presentations covered Ypsilanti's location, culture, recreation opportunity, economics, safety alliances, and transportation. Discussions with the development team included Ypsilanti's needs, infrastructure challenges for Water Street, community benefits desired, and the need to provide affordable housing and preserve the existing culture within the city of Ypsilanti. So Little Diversified Architecture, I'll refer to as Little, the Little team was able to connect us with the city of Shawnee. Shawnee's mayor, their assistant mayor, economic development minister, Chamber of Commerce director met with us as well as the Little team and are seeking to have a sister city relationship to promote cultural opportunities within the city of Ypsilanti. Shawnee is an international city located in the Shandong Peninsula on the Bohai Sea. They are primarily industrial. They have maker and art spaces, and they also are the largest producer of solar power in China. They have multiple provinces, so cities and counties are reversed in China. So city, county, and then there's smaller divisions within the county. So they are the city, which is more of a county relationship. So they're the broader oversight of the smaller districts. Their districts consist mainly of working class residential, and they have made relationships in Europe and also through Asia and would like to make a relationship with us. So that's something that we should discuss shortly. Now, as far as developments, and this is going to be very picture heavy at this point, go ahead if you'll move forward, Andrew. What we were surprised about after spending 5 days in Beijing, I was very concerned that there wasn't a fit. And then we were able to go to Ningbo. And Ningbo is a historic city that has gone great lengths to adapt their historic buildings and still maintain the character of a historic district, but bringing in modern amenities. If you go forward. One of the biggest elements, and this is throughout a couple different districts, is the open plaza and the green elements. So the interesting part about being there is you still feel in a very urban environment, and we're taught as planners that urban environments need to be on the street. Buildings need to have zero lot lines in order to maintain that urban feel. This was able to be an urban development while still maintaining open and green space and more of the pedestrian walkable atmosphere. Please go forward. The incorporation of public art as well as green aspects was very predominant, which I'll get into in just a few moments if you'll go on again. So every area of the building is utilized. There were second-story balconies that provided outdoor seating as well as outdoor seating on the first story. The designs were clean and the designs were very open and welcoming to small business. So leaving the Beijing districts and getting into the historic area of Ningbo, we were able to see how it's a community feel. Small business is very, very desirable and very well reflected. So a lot of the concerns that we've heard here is that, you know, we don't want large businesses. We want to keep the feel of downtown, of Depot Town, and that was very much the feel within these plazas. The scales and the relationship to the street was very important. So I took this picture as an example to show the step back, the step up in height, as well as maintaining that first story. And also, you know, on this side of the road that we're looking on, the interesting visual elements, and the green, the planting, the street trees, all being intact. And again, just some more pictures of the historic integration. One thing that I really noticed was within the historic districts was very minimal signage. The signage was kept only to the building. The signage was only an identification marker. There wasn't a lot of varying design types, so the signage was very simple. Oh, that's not mine. Going next. Again, even where there was national chains, those chains were very minimal. They were kept in conformance with the historic district. This made our travel team very happy.
Except for me, who refused to go in.
Except for, yes. So, the modern design elements, this is in Shanghai. This is actually the model that you saw a couple slides ago. So this is the model in action. So these are the student housing that lead into the secondary housing that's a little bit larger. Again, there's a lot of modern design elements, but a lack of, not a lack, it's still a cohesiveness to the feel of the environment that they're in. So common areas for the apartments. Go ahead and go forward. The way the apartments were set up was that these were very small areas between, as the mayor said, they range between 300 and 800 square feet. So to maximize the area, the kitchens are provided in a communal area, not in the individual units. So this specific development had induction burners, and then on the other side had sinks. There's also refrigerators. A different development we toured had actual stovetops. So this, go back a second. Thanks. So this is one of the apartment units, very much like you walked into the IKEA showroom. How do you make 300 square feet work? You put things on top of each other and make them work. So all that was provided. The washer and dryer is all one unit, both washes and dries. There's not dishwashers because you have the communal kitchen. The bathrooms were full unit bathrooms. If you go forward, Andrew. So that's one of those washer dryer units. There was a sink and a full bathroom in every unit. Go ahead. So again, back to design elements. Decorative concrete sidewalks, very visually interesting, much easier to maintain than solid brick sidewalks. And public art was very much incorporated as much as possible. So you have these open pedestrian areas and a lot of visually stimulating urban areas to be in. This is probably the most interesting, was the use of margins, boulevards, and parkways. It really, although we're only dealing with about 12 feet there across, it made you feel like you were in a park environment. So the boulevard, the middle area, the boulevard really allowed for bringing in the natural scape. In a lot of areas, the boulevards were used as pocket parks. They had, playground equipment more linear than in a circle. Very, very great use of the green space. So this is probably the most relevant development that we toured, and this is the historic riverfront development. This is a centuries-old buildings that were all retrofitted to bring into modern riverfront corridor. Parking lots were primarily underground. You would drive by this if you didn't know it. There wasn't signage telling you to park there. So, above the entrance was storefront, and you were able to enter the structure without very minimal impact. The ample and integrated bike parking. Obviously, bikes are very much part of the culture in China, and they made sure that bikes had places to move, to park, and they did not impact the ability to walk and still enjoy.
Everywhere we were, the bike lanes were fully separated.
I'm gonna get to it. The storefronts were open, they were accessible. This is more of an east meets west design, a lot of western type features within that development, but still utilizing that historic building. This one's a little harder to see, I apologize, but it's a pedestrian bridge over the river. There's tables and chairs. The river was a main focal point. Not only being there, it provided substantial opportunities to be on the river and have refuge from the urban environment. Free Wi-Fi in all shopping areas. This is a Wi-Fi and charging kiosk. So your mobile charging, just set your phone and get your quick charge and move on. That's the riverfront at night. Multiple visual elements, whether it was lit umbrellas or balloons, there was indication that this is a pedestrian area. This is the riverfront development. Good. Riverfront seating, again, what I was saying is the river is the focal point of this development. So a lot of lessons in transportation and access. Go ahead. This here is a covered pedestrian refuge and crossing. So the pedestrian traffic is mainly kept out of the street. It's provided in a separate area, and the chief will actually get into a little bit more of this. Bike lanes were always very well demarcated. This on the left, on the screen left, is the bike lane, which is fully segregated from the vehicle lane. Some areas it was small fencing. The shopping districts, it was done with planters and green, but always separated completely to allow for full access of all use of the road. These are some bike racks that, again, use plantings, very visually interesting. You know, again, it was really interesting to see the urban environment while maintaining the pedestrian areas, maintaining the plazas, the areas to gather. You know, very, very different from American design. Here, I apologize for the blurriness of that picture. Again, it's just showing the small fencing, how lanes are separated. Even the deceleration lane, so the lane to the right there is a turn lane. So the deceleration lane is separated from the travel lane. This picture of the bullet train. The train stations were as large as the airports. This is a pedestrian traffic circle. I can't say I'm much of a fan of it, but pedestrian traffic is kept off the roads because of the amount of traffic. So this allows for access to 4 different corners, and again, it's more visually interesting than having the bridge that most people don't care to climb up 400 stairs and down 400 stairs. This allows, they have escalators that are used in ramping systems to get up on the bridges. So in general, these are just some general observations. Go ahead. You know, tourism only accounts for 2% of China's gross domestic product. However, China is the key driver in outbound growth. So, hold there for a second. One of the strong cultural fields was, you know, English and Chinese are not a direct translation. The English language does not go word for word with the Mandarin. It's very hard to provide direct translation. The Chinese language is very poetic. It's not matter of fact like our language. Communication was very difficult. Most people did not speak English, and those who did speak English said, we didn't learn what you're speaking. So, yeah, and I equate that very much to, you know, I took a couple of years of Spanish, and I didn't learn how to go to Mexico and speak Spanish. I learned how to conjugate some verbs, and that's the same. In the Chinese, there's multiple dialects, but there's also, every syllable has 4 different pronunciations to it. It's a very difficult language to learn, and it's very difficult to communicate. But I think we've heard a lot of concerns about, as a culture, not blending. And I found it very easy in my own observation to understand. Because I've traveled to Europe, and I've traveled to Canada, and I've traveled to Mexico, and I've always known enough words to ask where the bathroom is. I've always known enough of the language to get to the food. You know, there's some very simple linguistics that you can master while traveling. When we arrived in China, had we not had a translator, and had we not had drivers, I would have found any Americans I could, and that's who I would have stayed with. Because I had no one to communicate with except for the group I was with. And I didn't know how to approach those communications. So, you know, the point that was very solid to me was when you have foreign students, they do have a much larger environment. But I think of sending my own college-age daughter, and would I send her to China? And I would be concerned because she couldn't communicate with the police. And there is no Google, and there is no Facebook, and there is no simple services on your phone that can provide that like we have here. So when we talk about students grouping, it's very easy to understand. We've arrived in a culture McDonald's in China had placemats. And they also had bowls and chopsticks, and they had a server that came to the table. So if I saw a familiar sign and said, oh, there's McDonald's, and I walked in, it's not what I think it is. You know, and in trying to order at McDonald's off of a picture menu, that was fine, but my credit card didn't work in most places in China. So it was cash. It was only cash because my credit card didn't work. So having no access, now I imagine coming here without my parents and being 20 years younger than I am, and I understand why I stay in my pod. Why I don't leave my group, because I don't know how. And the culture is that different. The culture is night and day different. So, but there's a desire, and the desire is being taught from the government down to be international. So China's pushing through propaganda to be international. Don't just be Chinese. So they have China has the largest number of students that leave China for studies, for college education. And the reason they do that is because they're told to leave. To leave and study and be international. So they're coming into new communities, but there's no transition area. You leave night and you arrive in day. 12 hours difference. So then ask for my observation, that's my observation. Go ahead and move forward. Mobile libraries, very similar to Redbox. You walk up, you swipe your card, and you take a book. Public recycling is everywhere. It's standard. I don't know that we saw one receptacle that did not have recycling. Every public receptacle included recycling.
And can I make note, having taken pictures of everyone that I saw anywhere, as I do all over, is it doesn't say trash and recycling, it says recyclable and non-recyclable.
Right.
Everywhere. Amazing.
Another very interesting learning observation was the government owns all property in China. So you do not, when you develop property, you never own it. You get at maximum a 70-year lease. This leads to really bad property conditions. There's no incentives to maintain the property. You get paid either way. The overcrowding in the cities means people need apartments. They're going to rent anywhere. The exterior of any development older than 10 years old is awful. You wouldn't want to live there. We wouldn't want to live there. It's not maintained because there's no ownership. There's no desire to maintain it. And as in the past, in China, if you have too nice of a building, the government will take it. They'll take it back for their own use. So there is not a standard, performance standard to say, keep the property. So again, a lot of questions of why are Chinese citizens buying property outside of China? Because of the human desire to own property. Because of return on investment, because of maintenance, because of overcrowding. We're able to see that in motion. Again, it's kind of hard to see, but the area with the mopeds is the area that is for pedestrians and bicyclists. The street is outside of the visual field of this picture. Okay. China's polluted. Everybody asks, it is. It's sad. They don't see clouds in Beijing, nor do they see stars. I don't know if they've ever seen stars in Beijing. You can't see. You are 40 kilometers away from the mountains and the Great Wall of China. you cannot see through that picture, you cannot see through any picture that you're surrounded by mountains until you're within a mile. However, I'm very impressed to see that China has taken a very strong approach to improving their environment. It's going to take time, it won't happen overnight, but they are backing up their approach with policy. All developments are required a certain percentage of trees and natural scape. The roads are lined with landscaping elements. They have reduced drive times. Your license plate number indicates what 3 days a week you can drive. You are only allowed to drive on main roads 3 days a week. You pay over $10,000 for your license plate. $10,000 US dollars a year to have the ability to drive a vehicle. Requiring biannual emission testing for all vehicles, dictating temperature settings of commercial buildings and hotels. At 1 a.m., the air conditioning shuts off. It doesn't return until 4 a.m. Not cool. Wish I would have known. Office buildings may only be set to 80 degrees. That's as much air conditioning as they get. Again, not cool. Wish I would have known.
It was great. I wasn't cold at all. I loved it.
Recycling programs and corporate emissions are also among the policy decisions. But, you know, they're backing their decisions. In Ningbo, the master plans call to not see any street from an aerial view. All streets should be lined in trees and not be seen from aerial view. So the policies are backing up the philosophy. Beijing is currently in the process of updating their master plan, and their major initiative is to move people out of the city center. They want people to understand that there are subways and there are trains and there are buses, and not everybody needs to live in the same mile. So they're trying to create suburbs. So where we have moved away from suburbs, they're trying to create suburbs so that there's a little bit more breathing room. Go ahead. So overall observations are the development isn't ready. The development's going to take time to be ready. There are some major completion steps that need to happen. And one of the biggest steps is identifying the actual developer. So right now, we have a development group and the development team. We have a team of people who are able to finance a project. We have architects who can draw a project. And we have a construction management firm that can price the project.
Can you speak into the mic? Thank you.
The development team is lacking a developer. So, you know, in development sense in China would be to petition the government and receive approval and then go forward and build with an architect. In the US and with public property, we're not dealing with a development company right now. So the developer, one of the biggest takeaways to the development team was finding a developer. So Wang Hu is part of the investment team, but they're not the development team. So in order to move forward, there needs to be an identification of the developer. Also, I've identified 3 different areas that need to be considered as we move forward. The first is the EB5 and the regional center. So identification and creation of the regional center, we need to be involved and kept into that process. The identification of infrastructure investment associated with the regional center. The job creation and maintenance plan with oversight and reporting plans for the city and our involvement. As far as the planning and development, there needs to be community-based design charrettes, A minimum of 2 workshops need to be identified. The plans need to be refined from a conceptual plan to a preliminary plan. The environmental work plan needs to be moved forward. Planning Commission, Historic District Commission, as well as detailed architecture. So we don't have any of that information at this point. But this wasn't more than a conceptual development until September 19th. So there needs to be clear development plans that don't exist at this time. As far as the development agreement, I'm recommending council work sessions up to 2 meetings monthly, and then the issues that need to be addressed through the work sessions are job creation, project oversight, timelines, incentives and taxes, remediation of the property, public service impacts, and design construction. And I think Chief has some information to add.
Mayor, City Council, good evening. Good evening, everybody. So I was asked to present some of the observations that I had. First of all, my mission to China had 2 parts. One was to present information, represent public safety in regards to the city of Ypsilanti, to investment groups and others. So I talked about the YPD, I talked about the Eastern Watchdog Safety Alliance, I talked about our close relationship with Eastern Michigan University. We also talked about crime information, some jurisdictional concerns. The internet is censored in China, so they may not always have access to the appropriate sites. So we talked about the difference between the township and the city and where to actually get the information that you need. I provided business cards and contact information for any questions that anybody had, etc. The second part of my mission was to look at how this might impact public safety in the city of Ypsilanti should a development of this nature come here. So one of the big differences is there's a huge disparity in the policing model that they use in China as they do in the U.S. So in the U.S., we basically have police officers that are quasi-generalists, trying to be experts in certain areas, and they have broad ranges of responsibilities. Pretty much any patrol officer gets sent on any kind of run. We take care of infrastructure, security, we do all those kinds of things. Backed up by some support by specialists in certain areas like forensics and investigations, etc. And here in the U.S., we have basically a layered effect. So we have our federal agencies that do certain things. We have our state police, the county, and municipalities, all kind of in some form of redundancy. Very different in China. The Chinese government, it's all federal. The police is all federally funded. But they bifurcate it to a point where you have your traffic police, and that's what they do. They just do traffic. They do enforcement, they do traffic direction, that's all they do. Then you have the Safety and Security Bureau, which is really kind of an interesting concept in that they do most of what we call traditional policing, but the way they do it is kind of community policing times 10. So they have very small stations, they call them public security stations. They're manned between 17 and 20 people, and they have a very small area of responsibility. And they do everything from soup to nuts in this small unit environment. Excuse me. So they're assigned there long-term. The government provides them housing, so they live in the area in which they work. So they're very well entrenched in their neighborhoods, and they're expected to be entrenched in every part of the livelihood of the neighborhood, not only in the law enforcement piece. Some of the other things they do is they also are tasked with registry of all persons living in the area, so they know everybody that lives there. Records of births, deaths, marriages, and divorces, and they confirm all those by house visits. So they actually go to everyone's house routinely and check and see who lives there. So they also regulate hotels and monitor visitors, how long they stay, and registration requirements for those. Third piece of the Chinese police puzzle, if you will, is called the People's Armed Police. They're tasked with infrastructure, government buildings, other significant national sites, the resource protection. That's what they do specifically. And then fourth is what they call their cyber police. And so they have a lot of advanced payment systems that are all done through cyber. Their phones basically operate as cash. So they investigate frauds of that nature. They're also charged with monitoring and maintaining the camera systems for the government, which I'll get into in a little bit. So that was one huge difference in some of the expectations that people coming here might have, in that we were not going to have, you know, a mini police station in all different sections of the city, so that people will have their own community police. That's not our model. So traffic control and patterns. Like Ms. Erna was talking about, they have many ways that they control cars and how they drive, where they drive, when they drive. The cost and license plates make it very prohibitive for a lot of people to actually own vehicles. So much of the population is on bikes, mopeds, and on foot, which is great when you're in those travel lanes. But those travel lanes, and they also have traffic control devices, interestingly enough. But when you get to the intersections, it becomes a quasi-free-for-all with pedestrians, mopeds, cars, making turns. Crosswalks don't mean anything. There's cars and everybody all mixed in together. It's kind of amazing to watch no one get killed. But that's going to be an issue. So that's important for the design of some of the infrastructure and the bike paths that we have, and obviously the border trail, all those kinds of things that have to do with this development, as well as maybe an educational piece for people who are coming here from a culture that doesn't understand. You don't intermingle with the traffic. So that may be important to us as well. Public transit, it's everywhere in China. There's buses, taxis, rail, subways, very prevalent. So there's some talk of rail coming to Ypsilanti, which affects a number of people doing, excuse me, lost my place. Some talk about bus and transit components, which may be in the design of the development, all of which also impacts parking availability. So those are all things that need to be considered when we have a little better understanding of what that means. Security and crime prevention by environmental design. So by going to some of these places and the developments they have, we're able to look at and have a better understanding of the size, the scope, possible physical designs of the overall project. We're also able to see what they're currently using for security measures. So I was able to observe access point control, locking mechanisms, gates, security walls, fencing, and cameras. Holy smokes, they have cameras. They have cameras everywhere. So their version of civil liberties is a little bit different than what we look at. They're willing to give up privacy for security. And some of the cameras obviously were in places where in the U.S. we really wouldn't want cameras. So those are just a few of the thoughts that I had that may be helpful in this process.
The police don't carry guns?
No, the police do not carry guns. Just the people's armed police carry guns.
Questions?
Questions?
Questions for our staff?
No one
cares.
I'd like to take just one quick second. I wasn't able to get it in there. Is the bike share program, and the bike share program is amazing. So the way bike share works is there are corrals throughout the city that have bikes. You walk up, you scan the bike you want, you take it and you leave, and you go wherever you want and you leave the bike. You don't have to have the same bike, you don't have to return that bike, you just leave it. Once a week, the companies come around, they pick up all the bikes, they return them back to the corralled areas. Most of which are by the subway stations, the bus stops, or major intersections, but you just leave the bike wherever you need to leave it. And all bikes have GPS. Your rental information is all on an app, very much like Uber. So very, very interesting to see that everyone and anyone can pick up a bike at any time.
Yeah, and that was interesting because there were, there were bike share everywhere we went, and every part of everywhere we went, and they were really being used by a huge variety of people.
Yes, young, old.
Yeah.
All.
Business people, people transporting goods. I mean,
Children.
It was really a huge range of use of the bike share. Questions from council?
I'll start with something. No, this is a long time, but this is a big question.
Could you please speak in the microphone?
This one isn't working. me, I'll yell. How's that?
That's good, thank you.
Okay, so obviously, the members of council have, and public have expressed, I don't know, 12, 15 different concerns we've all said we need answers about. This looks like there's too much to do in the next couple months. What is the other side's point of view about their timeline to get a decision from us? And how would we, do we need more time? Can we get it done within this time with effort? Are they flexible? This is the big question.
Yeah, at this point, my recommendation is there's no way we could do this by December.
Okay.
It's not feasible.
And are they good with that?
They will have to be.
Well, okay, but so there's no outside force forcing the deadline? Is that correct? Or am I wrong?
No, the only outside force to the deadline is the purchase agreement, which I believe says December 31st. Right, it would have to be amended. But I don't think it's possible to create a development plan with a preliminary design. So I will continue to refer to the existing design as conceptual. I think we've had some serious discussions about the concept, but the concept isn't in a preliminary design presentation form yet. And that needs to be refined, but that shouldn't be refined without some design charrettes and without some input. You know, not only, I think the people who traveled have serious input based on what we saw, but I think the public has a lot of input into what they want to see and should be involved in that. So, you know, scheduling those meetings, I feel hard pressed to schedule those meetings by December 31st at this point.
So, again, this is big picture stuff right now, but it's been in the back of all of our minds, publicly and privately, is that this project, if done right, has the potential to be absolutely groundbreaking, not just for our city, but for the region. Maybe the whole nation is, in terms of relations with China and so forth. There's so many elements to it, though. I mean, you got the transportation, the cultural integration, you got housing design. You showed us some mini apartments. I don't think that's what they have in mind here, or at least not so much. But,
some of them, yes.
But, I mean, that small houses is part of what has been in the trend lately here. One of our speakers talked about the need to have more small housing and RVs on lots. There's a lot of potential there if you have enough time to do it well and work out these things. Come up with a tremendous design that would meet a lot of different concerns, a lot of different problems. Another aspect of this that I see is integrating International Village with the rest of the city. We're not there on public transportation, on bicycling, on walkability. So there's a lot more than just this project's design. It's the integration with the rest of the community. I think they're talking about that with you. That's the sense I get.
We had a lot of discussion about that while we traveled. We started that discussion before we traveled by, you know, there's a meeting coming up. Let me tell you the date and time. There's a meeting coming up Monday the 23rd to discuss the vision of the Ypsilanti Transit Center and the and bus routes and the overall evaluation of the current state of the YTC. So that's, you know, that's something that could be considered. That's something that could be, you know, implemented, but not in 2 months.
Okay. So those are the kinds of things we need to talk more about and plan better. jumping to another area, one of the things that struck me is that, of course, we've done extensive work with our zoning and all the shreds and planning was done a few years ago. It's been mentioned. Part of that is that anything built, we would like to have it be flexible enough in the outside design, the overall design, that if a particular use ends 5 years, 20 years, 50 years from now, that it can be converted to other uses. Do you see any problems in that area with what they're talking about for our International Village? Is it something where if they stop using it for student housing, for example, it could be converted to other kinds of housing, etc.?
I can't answer that because I don't, that design hasn't been finalized. I haven't been presented with that idea.
Is that something that came up, that concept of being flexible in the long run in the design?
It isn't something that I had any specific conversation about.
So, someone else can butt in if they have a question. I'm just thinking these as I go here, as I get my impressions. There was a third area, it's not coming back to my mind though.
Other folks, well, Dan's getting that together. Other questions or comments?
Oh, I know what it is. I don't know who you did. So what was your impression of the investors, who they are, what their motivations are, why they're involved in this?
So the investor relationship is the idea of being involved in the development. So we met people in three different, I would call them three different factions. We met the EB5 investor, which is interested in themselves or a family member moving to the United States. So that's one faction. They know they want to be involved. Michigan isn't necessarily where they want to move. So the thing with EB5 is if a visa is issued 7 years later, there's no commitment to move to this development. There's no commitment to even move to the state. So it's a visa application. And that's another area that I think there's been some misunderstanding, that after 7 years, it's eligibility to apply. So they're not handed a green card at 7 years, they're handed their eligibility. So
They're not buying a visa.
They're not buying a visa, they're buying an opportunity to apply for a visa.
When they apply, they're under the original terms as everyone else, is that true?
No.
No, okay, how's it different?
The investment and the job creation have to be lined up.
My question is, once they meet those qualifications and they're applying for a visa, are they then under the same standards for a visa as anyone who is not an investor?
Yes, they have to be a qualified immigrant.
So they're not guaranteed it, or they met the job and investment terms?
No.
They could be rejected.
They're guaranteed the application. They're not guaranteed citizenship.
All right, that clarifies that for me. I was not clear on that.
Yeah.
All right, so there was a third group, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. So there was that group. Then there was the business owner group who's looking for business opportunities, most of which already have companies, corporations. They're looking to do international business or expand existing international business. Like I said, we met several people who are already operating in San Francisco or they're operating in New York, but haven't merged into other areas.
So they're just looking for another business partner, that being our key person.
Yes.
I forgot her name.
Amy Foster.
Amy Foster.
Right.
Potentially Amy Foster is a business partner on this.
Right. Global Capital or one of the
What
many
projects
ventures.
those investors might be doing?
Correct.
They're individual rich people or corporate investors.
Right. Okay. And then the second area of investment was I have family money, I have access to capital, and I'm looking for investment. We want global investment. I'm looking to diversify my assets. And this is something I will consider doing. I mean, it's really no different than dealing with American developers. Why do they develop where they develop?
Are any of these investors comparable to a brokerage firm or bank in the United States? People, or a hedge fund, or et cetera?
I don't know that I can answer that.
Okay.
Not to,
There's a lot of variety though.
right.
Okay.
It was, so my observation was people, corporate groups tend to own multiple corporations. So we were able to meet with one of the investors who owns a capital corporation, which is essentially a financing go-between between the government and development, and also owns an app development company.
Back to the first group, the EB5 people who are seeking visas and want to move here. What did you sense their motivations for?
No, I would say that was probably the hardest group to communicate with. You know, as far as language, their interest was mainly in the development, when the development would be happening, and if the regional center, the creation timeline.
So they had a presentation, kind of like we had at council in Chinese. So most of that was like them being presented to you and we gave like intro to the city kind of thing. So they were just there as like learning about just like what happened here, some of those developers here, hey, here's a development opportunity.
Well, part of what I was wondering about is if you got into this idea, one thing that I read suggested that a lot of investors in these areas and a lot of other Chinese who are trying to come to the United States are doing it because they want what we have, like immigrants from any place. They want what we have. They want the freedom, they want the education opportunities, the business opportunities. They want to be less controlled by the central government, and so forth. They want a good place for their family.
Right.
Is that the sense you had with any of them?
Oh, absolutely. We talked, that's kind of what I said earlier, was we talked a lot about recreation opportunity. And I think there's a huge desire to be not one of a billion.
I like them when I first
So to be in smaller urban environments. So, you know, if you're raised in an urban environment, you tend to stay within an urban environment because of the walkability, because of the accessibility to your basic needs. The lack of having a vehicle is desirable but when you're part of literally a billion people in 1 square mile, that takes away from it. So I think there's a desire to have more access.
So just to kind of put an overall view, I'm getting the impression that you believe, from your experience, that their desires, their goals, their purposes in being part of this as an EB5 to move here is to get the same kind of things that people here would want from our project if they're living there.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, that's my perception.
All right, I'll stop there.
What, you know, and what I heard and what I read, you know, heard in many places, but also, you know, I've read and such too, right? In China, everyone was poor 30, 40 years ago. So they're in this sort of the same way when I was in Central Eastern Europe. There's this sort of aspirational ideology that really permeates sort of the culture around entrepreneurism, because that wasn't an opportunity before, right? So I saw some real interesting parallels around that. And China has just done it at such like a crazy speed that they've had, for instance, they've seen and felt the environmental degradation of like not being able to breathe, people having masks everywhere, aquifers being drained, etc. And so because it's been so visible, they recognize how that, from a public health and economic development standpoint, is now hugely limiting. And so they've reversed course in like a pretty big, pretty fast way, for instance, on environmental policy at a lot of different levels. So they're in this like trajectory, and that was fascinating to watch from a physical landscape transformation from the train in particular. Standpoint and this sort of the quick urbanization, but also in this sort of aspirational ideology, because it's not so long ago that things were so different, and like none of that opportunity was there, you know, 30, 40 years ago.
Kind of like
That was
long
fascinating.
times 1950s America.
Mm-hmm.
Very much felt. I wasn't alive in 1950s America, but that spirit is something I felt. I thought that was fascinating. Councilmember Brashear?
I've had a number of constituents contact me about some fears about whether or not the residents of the IB are going to want to be integrated in our community, and this kind of thing. And you're not going to be able to give us a really good answer because you were in China and the International Village is planned on being multicultural, right? So I really get that, and I also am very aware that many of the cultures in Asian cultures are very different, and so it's not, you can't extrapolate very easily. Okay, but I heard you say two things that sound different, and I know that they both can be true at the same time, but I really want to hear a lot about it. That they're very, very attracted to knowing about our entertainment districts, how to get there, how to integrate with them, what's going on there, what can they expect, that kind of thing. And that they plan on participating in them, and they hope that their residents will, okay? And I also heard that, and I know this from our daughter being bilingual in an Asian language, that, the languages are radically different. And I also know that being in a place where they might not have to speak a foreign language just to, figure out how to, get to the corner, right, would be a vast relief. So I'd love to hear more about how they're both interested in our culture and what you heard about that, because our town, our city is very, we're very tightly knit. And so this is going to be a question that's going to come up. So that's my first question.
Can I answer that first? Yeah. So I think that is still one of the is a big concern, the sort of insular nature. I've heard that as well. And I've been trying to think. Well, I think it might behoove us to bring in some of the folks who work with international students at our local universities. Actually, kind of educate us about what they do at the universities, to what they face, what they do to support sort of integration, etc. Because I think that is a very real. I didn't have that many direct conversations about that sort of issue with people, but I think her best observations are salient, and concerns that came up about insular nature. So I think the ability of the project to really attract that international, including domestic, students as well, is probably one of those key things, so that it isn't just one culture, but it's sort of like, some of the international residences I've done at U of M who really do a lot very specifically through the university, and some of those institutions do community integration, etc. So I think, I don't have an answer to that, but I think that's the thing that I came back and still concerned about, what both can happen from a design perspective, but what also can happen from a community perspective to help that integration. And I don't have those answers, but I think it's a very real thing, given the insular nature, particularly of some of the Asian cultures.
So multiple thoughts, and I'm gonna relay one through an experience. Being in Beijing was very, we had guides, we had people with us all the time, so we were never left to our own devices, which was good because everybody had questions. What's that? What's that? Where's Amanda? Our wanderer, but we kind of stayed to ourselves, except for when we were taken to events. But when we only spent a day in Shanghai, and the difference was night and day immediately, because Shanghai is more of an international city. It was evident from the moment we arrived at the hotel. There were multi-cultures, multi-races, different ethnicities at the hotel, and right away English was more predominant. And it was like, okay, deep breath. We went to the, late in the evening, a couple of us went to the bar, and we were able to talk to the bartender. We were able to ask them lots of questions. The feeling right away. So my response to your question is, if it were only one race, if there were only one ethnicity, I think it stays very insular. But there's a feeling immediately when something is international. And that feeling was very apparent to me right away. Our bartender was Indian. We said, well, why did you move here? We were able to discuss, what drew you here, and that opened up, that created a bridge. So that would That's the best I can answer.
That's going to be an ongoing question, and I would really like, if we're talking about setting aside, you know, work sessions, there's such a long list of what we have to cover, okay? But that should be on it. The only other thing, I mean, you opened up a massive series of questions for all of us, and I don't think we're going to be able to address it tonight, regarding the role of the developer versus the role of who we've been working with so far and what that means and timeline and things. But I really am not going to ask questions about that now, but I expect, I'm looking forward to getting very clear communications about that very soon. I want to ask one other question, then I'll step back, is that you mentioned briefly CBA and, you know, ideas, and so my guess is, did you start to get a sense of the role of a CBA in our negotiations at all in this trip? Longer exposure to the developer, or rather, Amy?
Yes, okay. To a point. So I think we had a lot of takeaways from the meeting on the 19th, and a lot of areas that we were able to discuss at, you know, different times. But being that we couldn't and shouldn't speak for council specifically of what we wanted or what had to happen, we discussed concepts and ideas, and there is an openness and there's a willingness to come to the table with that. What we need to do is be able to better define from the council table what that looks like. So it's very well understood that there will be an agreement. It's not understood what that agreement will look like, because we talked about multiple things that were discussed. Jobs, offerings, you know, City First. We talked about, you know, working with WCC. We talked about, you know, working with Michigan Works. There's lots of ways that we could create some really innovative designs for community benefits, but we can't do it in isolation. So
a lot of, just as a further response to that, a lot of the sort of back and forth and learning was related to sort of the physical form, and seeing a lot of things that were like, no, that's not in keeping with our scale, typology, community need, and hey, that is. And so there was a lot of back and forth with them in seeing and being able to communicate, like, hey, our community really values multimodal transportation or bike lanes, and seeing that being prevalent everywhere. So both from a building perspective and a physical form perspective, I felt like we were able to really like kind of point and see what did and didn't work. And also Wayne, who was with us from Spence Brothers, was really looking at like construction quality, like quality of development. He has a different kind of lens, because he wanted to make sure that that's some of the vetting he told me he was trying to do, was see that like what someone was planning or budgeting or, you know, et cetera, would really be the kind of codes and standards and sort of things, sort of the integrity of architecture that we're looking at. So, you know, I think we each had a different lens in that way. So, in addition.
That's enough for now. I have a lot more, but that'll be fun.
I want to share one of the other things that, I mean, there's much to say, is that also that there's public bathrooms that are like new and attended everywhere, which was really cool to see. Like in every couple blocks, there was a whole big building that was a public bathroom, like not a porta potty. That was excellent. But I thought that the scale of the commercial districts that we saw, which reminded me, which were, you know, small storefronts that you either went in or you're just buying something, food over there, and you're watching people making the noodles, etc. And there were so many that reminded me of bigger cities like Toronto and other places where there's just like blocks that have so many, lots of all independently owned businesses. So that felt good in terms of sort of scale and thinking about the possibility of really an international village that could have lots of opportunities in a way. I don't see a new U.S. development as much. I see the U.S. development making bigger, you know, a big place for this sort of stock kind of restaurant. So that was a difference from what I see, at least, and you know, when I'm traveling and see things around the U.S., that felt both in line with sort of the scale of some, and actually much smaller places in some of these districts than our storefronts even here, but could really create a lot of opportunity for local business. And so one of the things for me in the development agreement is really looking at mandating percentage of local ownership or local opportunities, et cetera, for ownership of small and really even places for kind of micro businesses, which I see as a real opportunity and a need for people in Ypsi and around the region who want to try out something in a small space. So that was, I thought, a really valuable thing and something that we could really cement if this project goes forward and goes to a development agreement around how to make sure there's those local opportunities for business startup. Further comments or questions from council? Thank you. Moving on. Oh.
Okay, so we saw a lot of pictures, we heard a lot of information about what it's like to be in China. So what specifically out of this adventure would we say that we would change in the development or change in the development agreement? What did we learn that we're going to come back and change? Or, you know, we saw pictures, you know, in the historic town, this is, let's say, the historic village, or historic development per se, but are we talking about changing our design standards in the zoning code? You know, when we looked at the green space kind of stuff, what did you see that was not in their presentation to us back in September?
The integration of the historic structures and how to recreate without replicating the district. We talked quite a bit about better utilization of the river. The concept proposal calls for condos and apartments to be on the river, not fully exploiting the entertainment district that we saw that worked so well, how to extend River Road as an extension of downtown and Depot Town. You know, possibly where the transit area can function and doesn't function. You know, that it can't function on part of the pedestrian path. It has to be moved out. We were able to look at
microphone.
We were able to look at sizes of development and how to amp what the appropriate scale was. There was a lot of discussion about scale, whether it's 2-story, 3-story, whether there's the apartment unit or the apartment buildings, you know, shouldn't be the focal point of the development. There should be a lead to the height. I do see changes to the zoning code. I think the bike separation is something that is very doable and something that we should look at and be more innovative with. Whether it's the pavement, whether it's different colored pavement, or whether it's an actual physical separation. I also was able to see through new development, and it will be a recommendation to the development to create those pedestrian plazas in front of development corners. That, you know, the hard corner is, it takes away from the pedestrian experience, it takes away from the public experience. So those would be my major takeaways.
Further? Seeing that, we'll move on to the hearing.
Resolution to adopt an ordinance to establish the Ypsilanti Citizens Police Advisory Commission. It is resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that an ordinance entitled an ordinance to establish the Ypsilanti Citizens Police Advisory Commission be adopted on first reading. And I so move.
So moved by Mayor Pro Tem Brown. Supported by Councilmember Murdock. What order of operations do we want to do to this? Mr. Shane or Chief? I mean, I can start as you're getting up there. Background, we had a pretty extensive working session in August. Where we really hashed through the recommendations that had come through our task force over the last year plus, as well as really looked through that working session in depth and compared and contrasted the commission's and various versions of how they function and what kind of communities they're in and how they're staffed, et cetera, in communities across the country, and kind of hash through what we felt like made sense based on the best practices that the task force had found, and that we were, again, looking deeper at some of the comparables.
You said that way pretty well, Mayor. I will also, well, first of all, good evening, Council. As far as from that working session, which I was not at, so you, Council had a better idea what was discussed there. This is, I believe, a revised version of the previously discussed ordinance back in the spring. From that model, and then revised according to the council discussion at the working session, which was last month, I think. So that's really all to say about it. I can answer any questions or can move forward.
That idea of this police review board and stuff goes back several years actually, but that's the latest iteration of it. You know, it went through various committees, and the Human Relations Commission, and a joint committee, and a separate committee, and that came to council, and council didn't like the version that was there, and then a few months later brought it back up to bring it back up to see if we could get a better version, which, as you stated, we modified that one and we brought it to council again, and it was some minor adjustments were made at that meeting. Here it is.
I will say that this is a first reading of a new ordinance with public hearing, as opposed to attempting to piggyback off the previous reading back in last spring. So this is
well, we defeated that one.
right. That put it down to there. Yeah. Right. So, all right. There's nothing else.
I have a couple of small, one small edits. I'd like to change the word citizens to residents.
Throughout?
Huh?
Throughout?
Throughout. And the reason is just out of respect for our do not ask.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I can do is find, search, and replace, and then give it a quick read on second reading.
It's a little thing, and I think it's a chair, not a president.
Where do you see that?
Section 2.203B.
I think you're right. So those are amendments we can make after the public hearing.
Right, that's what, yeah. Because I have stuff.
Yeah, in terms of a change, I don't know, that was recommended, I don't know if it makes a difference, but you know, the city attorney's already said that they have to be eligible electors to be on any of these committees.
That's correct. I don't disagree with that, but that's a policy between the council. I don't care if it's
First thing, that door actually has to remain open.
Oh, sorry.
Well, then, can you quiet them down then?
Yes.
Can you quiet them down so we can hear you guys? That's the reason, that's the only reason it's closed. I closed it because I couldn't hear anything.
I didn't know.
So.
Don't make her mad.
Was there anything else? All right, thank you.
From the public would like to
I didn't say that.
Sue.
Hi, my name is Sue Melton, 3302 to 0409. Well, I gotta say, this looks really good. It's about time. It should have never took this long. Huh?
Stay on the public hearing.
Yeah, no, I am. I think that the way you structured it is good, in that it's not too narrow. It kind of will let it flow for how the commission wants it to work, and how the city wants it to work, and how the residents want it to work. I think this is a good, I think it will work really well. That's all.
Thank you. I hadn't seen it was up there. I thought you were pointing to International Village.
No.
That was my only reason for holding you. Thank you, Ms. Melfi. Who else would like to address this public hearing about the commission? Hearing none.
I'd just like to say, Ashley Fox, 905 Pleasant Drive, here in Ypsi. And I just wanted to commend the council for having a youth member of this commission. I think it's really important. Thank you.
Public hearing for an ordinance entitled an ordinance to establish the Ypsilanti Citizens Police Advisory Commission be officially closed.
So moved by Mayor Pro Tem Brown, supported by Councilmember Vogt. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Further council discussion? Councilperson Richardson?
Yes, section 2.203, the B has been addressed. C, where it says establish and maintain a meeting schedule and meet at least quarterly. I'd like that to change, I think, monthly, and as necessary to hear complaints and to hear grievances from the community. Quarterly doesn't, just letting me quarterly doesn't work, because I mean, if somebody has a grievance or a complaint, it needs to be heard as soon as possible.
My recollection, and tell me if I'm remembering incorrectly from our August discussion, was sort of that was basic minimum, but let this body, when it forms, sort of decide if they do standard quarterly plus ad hoc, or decide exactly other frequency.
This is a floor. The quarterly is a floor.
You say what?
The quarterly meeting schedule would be a floor.
The minimum.
Is what.
Okay, but I think that we
If you
need
want
to,
a higher floor.
yes, I do, because if you set the floor that low, people will aim that low. I think it needs to be more than that. Also on E, it's pretty much the same thing. It says to file a written report of its activities, findings, recommendations, if any, to the city council at least annually, and I'd like that changed to as, also add as necessary, because,
So if you just leave, kind of language-wise, if you say as necessary, that might be removing the annual floor. Does that make sense?
well, I think what needs to be more than annually. So, and as necessary might not be the correct word, but we need to hear from them if there's something going on. And the whole purpose of this thing is so that the complaints and grievances or whatever can be addressed. And we need to hear about them when they come up, rather than annually or quarterly or biannually or whatever. So that's why I'm saying that wording needs to be adjusted and changed.
Councilperson Richardson, what about for just that one item in E, to add something along the lines of, or more frequently as, at least annually, but more frequently as necessary, or something like that? It keeps the annual floor, so that at least happens there, but set, is saying, but more frequently, or more frequently as needed.
We could change it to quarterly to match the other one.
Right. But then I want the quarterly adjusted too. So we could change it, but more than annually. So that's what I'm pushing for, is more than annually.
Councilperson Richardson, so a quarterly report?
I could see a written quarterly report, okay? But also, or as needed, you gotta have that needed in there so that it's not just sitting around waiting and, coming on.
So who's deciding the as needed? It looks like the commission itself would decide that, set the criteria for that, or maybe they would complaint decisions.
I think we need to set the criteria, because I think that if there's complaints and if there's grievances or if something's going on, we need to hear from them and not wait for them to decide when they want to talk to us.
So are you suggesting what you're saying, at least quarterly or as requested by council? Is that what you're suggesting is the spirit of?
I'm not saying requested by council, I'm saying that they need to let us know when there are grievances, when there are complaints, they need to come to council with them. So that we are kept totally informed about what's going on. And if we just leave it this way, they may never want to come bring them to us.
I have a question for Councilwoman Richardson. How long of a delay would be acceptable to you from the time of a complaint until they meet, make a recommendation, and get it back to council? How long?
I think if there are complaints and grievances, that they need to move on them immediately.
What does that mean? What is immediately? Today, a month?
No.
I'm asking.
Immediately is immediately. If there is a complaint, a major issue or whatever, and even quasi-major, then it needs to be addressed. The longer things that complaints and grievances sit around, the more festered they get.
I agree with that, but I'm trying to get a sense of what you think is the longest that makes sense. If we're going to put a time limit in here and now let the commission decide, we have to have some sense of how fast we think they need to be active.
Okay.
And that's what I'm not hearing from you yet.
So Mayor Pro Tem Brown and then Councilperson Rob and then Councilperson Brenda.
So I guess correct me, Dan, Mr. Duchesne, I'm sorry if I'm wrong. So before I ask my question to you, so I think we did decide on this to leave it a little more broad for the commission to make some decisions on their own. Although I do want to receive information like on grievances or complaints when they are made. But my question is, don't all the complaints or grievances go to the city manager as well? And so he would be able to...
Here's the duty proposed by council. It's found under section 201 sub C. To review police complaint investigatory findings and report to council on the commission's analysis of these findings. So the complaint procedure is as it is, and then this body, the commission here reviews the findings of those complaints and then makes a report of those to council. And that's in the duties of the commission. The frequency is a policy determination.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Mayor Pro Tem?
So, Councilor Richardson, you're asking for their analysis to come to us as soon as possible, because we can already receive the actual grievance and the complaint through the original process if it goes to the city manager.
When that becomes available,
when it becomes available,
right?
But I'm saying, so I'm asking the question for the Councilor Richardson that your request is for their analysis is what you want immediately.
I want us to know that they have received
a complaint.
Right, the complaint, and particularly, okay, let's go back and look at the dog leg complaint. You know, that didn't come to, that did, but there were some other things that happened that did not come, and the only reason we knew was actually that the people that issued the complaint, they came and told us, So I'm saying that council needs to know as soon as possible.
Right, so my question is, I guess overall for the body then, is that do we want that, I think we should be asking for that information to come from the city manager to us, originally, when we first get a complaint or agreement, and then allow the commission to do what we charge them to do with the analysis, and we also need to receive that information too. Maybe we should be asking our employees to tell us that when we get one, rather than charging the commission to do it more frequently to us directly, since they already received them. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, so Councilmember Rob and then Councilmember Murdoch, and then we'll ask staff to be responsible.
This is sort of turning into the absurd. We are totally redefining what this organization does. When we came up with what this organization was an organization that had absolutely no power, and all they did was review completed complaints and say whether they agree or whether they don't agree. And now we're talking about changing the entire thing. I mean, if you want this group to hear complaints, then we need to change that into their purpose, because that's not remotely what their purpose is. And if you want this group to hear complaints, again, this goes back to what I said at the beginning. Council is the only organization that has the power to do this. And yet here we are charging someone else to do this, but we want them to report to us all the time. I mean, we're really gone off the rails on this. This was very simple and very basic and very reckless, that this group was just going to look at the analysis of the complaint process, or the finished complaints, and say whether they agreed with them or they didn't agree with them. And now we're sort of opening up the whole Pandora's box and trying to redesign what this ordinance does and what this group does at the first reading.
I'm not trying to do that.
I think the 2 points I would have made have just been made. I think it basically, under the purpose, says they will review the complaint procedure, the complaint process that went through, and they would notify council of what they said about that. So I think we're covered that way. Yeah, this is not a full-fledged investigatory body, particularly for complaints.
Because what we found is the cities do that have hundreds of $1,000s budgets and hire private investigators, and that's a different thing, a different scale.
More than that, we had a list of 8 different laws that restricted what we were able to do by the time. So we're not actually, any complaint that comes to the city about police misconduct is going to be handled by the police first, and then if that is not satisfactory, but that process is not adequate, then there's an ability to sit with the advisory commission, but they don't have power, they can only refer to the council. Okay, so that's what we are, and I think that we're restricted in what we can do. We are controlled, what we're able to do in this is controlled by the county and the state and HR rules and privacy rules and charter, and I mean, we had so many things we could hardly turn by the time we were done with this.
Right? Like this law?
Yeah. And so this is the best we could come up with, but no, it can't do what Councilor Richardson wants it to do, and I appreciate her frustration.
I am not asking us to change what they do. Nobody's really understood evidently what I'm saying. I know that they don't have power. I know that there was a list of things that they couldn't do. I understand all of that, and that's not what I'm asking. I'm just saying that council be informed more often than quarterly, more often than annually. Keep council informed more often. I'm not asking that they change and do analysis and investigate and all that. I'm not saying that. People are trying to put words in my mouth, and that's not what I'm saying.
If you want to be informed, then ask the city manager to forward you every single complaint finding like they did the last time we had the work session. I mean, that's the thing. If you want to be informed, ask for that information. You're asking for the same information to be passed to a third party.
Councilperson Bashir, and then let's hear from the chief and city manager.
Yeah, I'm just recalling the discussion that we had in our work session on this. One of the things we talked about was trying not to micromanage this commission, to let them find their own level. Having worked with a newly formed commission and seeing how that goes, I think it's really important to not. And I can't imagine that somebody who would be very excited to be on a police advisory commission would then say, hey, good news, I only have to meet quarterly. I mean, I think they're going to be very interested in trying to make their commission as strong and effective as possible, and I think I'd like this council to continue to leave language in here to let that commission find its own level. And use the strength of our community rather than dictate to the strength of our community.
Manager, Mayor, Chief, thoughts, just.
Well, I just wanted to note a couple things. First of all, I think the timing of how often they communicate with the council is, I feel comfortable with the language as it is, and I think we need to give some leeway to the commission to be able to say, we need to bring this back to council at this time, but requiring them to provide the annual report. My concern more is with who the commission is advising, because some of the language says that they will make recommendations to the police chief on organizational operations and other things. I really believe that those recommendations should be going to the city manager,
and then the city manager should be following up on those, either with the city council if additional policy needs to be established, or in my direction to the police chief, because the police chief works for me. But I think that advisory capacity should be directly to the city manager. That's what I would note on this. Other than that, I don't really have concerns with the ordinance. Chief?
So, I don't have a problem with however many times you want to meet, that's fine. I'm good with that, I want to meet every month, that's fine. The thing I find most exciting about this is some of those pieces that try to establish a better, closer tie with the police department and the citizens. So we're very, very supportive of that, very excited to try and get into this and select these commissioners and get them moving. So really, I don't have much to say. That's it.
Can you remind us, sorry, I don't want to, you know, we did this for some hours in our session, so I don't want to go back in, but I'm just trying to remember exactly how we came to this end. Is that, so you gave us, for instance, as just a point of information that night, a summary of the complaints in the past year, or something like that.
So I can only speak to the 4 years I've been here, and we've averaged between 6 and 9 complaints a year.
Right, and one of the reasons we want this commission to exist to help continue to look at the process and have a, another way in, so that to make sure part of the what we say is somewhere here is to educate the public about complaint process, to make sure people know it's an accessible process as it's been refined, sort of, et
And the subcommittee group did a very extensive job about putting it on the website and take. I mean, we're pretty much our complaint policy is unprecedented anywhere. We take anonymous complaints, third-party anonymous complaints on the internet, by phone. There's 3 different places you can pick up a packet in the city. So I think it's a pretty robust process, especially in comparison to just about anywhere else.
So I guess my question then is, without going way into the weeds on where what we did at the August session, but like we don't currently receive a notice of every time there's a complaint being investigated.
Correct.
And there were some restrictions, right, and some of the laws about why we couldn't.
So there are some personal rules. There's some language in the contract regarding citizen complaints and how they're investigated. There's some federal law that have to do with HR pieces, especially restrictions on people's personnel files. Blicky is one of them. Gary is another law we have to be careful of. Weingarten is again a notification rule. So there's a whole minefield of things that we have to try and negotiate when we do these types of situations. We have to be very mindful to be able to take care of the employees' rights and still be able to hold people accountable. Which I think in the summary you saw that almost the majority of the time we found that the complaint was valid and we took some action against the officer. Again, there's some privacy issues where we can't tell you what that is either. We can tell you that there was discipline, but we can't tell you what the discipline was. So
what I'm hearing from Councilperson Richardson, and I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding, and so I'm trying to ask this question, is wanting to know when there's an issue, when there's a complaint in process. But what I'm recalling is we can't always, we can maybe know broad details around that. What are the restrictions to the information sharing from you or via city manager around a complaint exists,
right.
And then what?
So that, again, that's another case-by-case situation depending on what the severity of the issue is. Because again, God forbid it should happen, but sometimes things cross over into the criminal realm. So then it changes the confidentiality issues once again. So we really have to kind of look at every situation.
Thank you. Councilmember Murdoch?
Yes, sir.
Is the complaint itself confidential? Not your
I'm
response.
not sure your question.
Somebody files a complaint.
Yes. The document itself is that the fact that there is a complaint is not.
No, let me paraphrase that. Can we be told there was a complaint filed the other day about an officer was rude or something like that? That is, I think that's what he's talking about. That is the description of the complaint, not giving us the complaint, but saying there was a complaint filed this is what it
Right,
was.
I thought that's what I answered. The fact that there's a complaint, yes, we can tell you that the actual substance of that complaint, the actual narrative the person wrote out, again, it depends on what the nature of that is.
But Councilmember Rob is asking, can you say, not just there's a complaint, but there's a
Yeah,
complaint
so
of
the
this
change
type of
of
nature?
they were rude, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so that's the level that we can generally have.
I think that the summary I provided during the August meeting was pretty specific to those things without actually naming the officers of the complainants, so you can understand what those complaints were and whether they're held accountable or not. Which is pretty much what I understand what you want me to provide to the commission on an ongoing basis. Correct? Yes?
I think that was an understanding, yeah. Councilor Richardson, did I understand what you were asking in terms of awareness of a complaint existing, and I was trying to gain clarity for myself on what that meant, but was that what you were getting at in part?
Right, and, and I think that, I know that, I respect the privacy issue and all of that and everything, but if we look at the, let's go back to the complaint that brought all of this about, okay? And it might not have been an official complaint, but it was the issue. And it was the issue of what had happened with the group that had been down by the library. That was what brought all of this, moved us, that pushed us to start working on this, pushed us to the task force that did not really address the issues, because at that time it was really a black issue with the police. It was, that's what it was, and that's what the people that were involved, that's how they were presented. And it wasn't just a written complaint, it was a very verbal complaint, and it was, broadcast abroad. And those are the kinds of things that I'm really talking about. Not the complaint that the officer, didn't say good morning to me, he just wrote me out a ticket. I'm not talking about those, because I know that there are those kinds of things also. And I might have made that, very, very, very simple. But there are some complaints that are almost that simple. Because people have told me, well, the officer didn't speak to me, he did this and this and this, and I'm filing a complaint. That, really, okay, you really want to file a complaint because he didn't say good morning. But I'm talking about that there are some things that, that could create major problems or major, situations. And that's basically what I'm talking about,
Well, I would, what Mayor Pro Tem said about requesting that the complaint exists, and here's the broad nature of it, be a thing that we are informed of in our, in our weekly or in our monthly, or maybe in the city manager communications, because those are coming to us at least twice a month. I mean, that could just be a short note in there that lets in a pretty regular way we're all looking at, et cetera, and know that. That could be an easy norm. The way that we receive if the taser is ever deployed, we receive a report within a couple of days. We know the whole story. Of course, we're not asking for that because it's a different thing, different policy. But that's just part of the norm of your form. Would that get to what you're asking?
Let's move on.
Okay. Are there further discussions? Okay, I wanted to bring up the city manager noted a couple places where he had a recommendation to change from chief of police to city manager.
So it's 201F and H, change chief of police to city manager.
How do people feel about that?
The sheriff has an advisory board, they give advice to the sheriff. They don't give it to the board of commissioners, they don't give it to the
Sheriff's elected on his own.
That's fine. I mean, I think these guys are elected.
There's a
Yeah,
change,
but-
is what he's saying.
City manager is the boss of the chief of police.
The county board is not.
I know we're the boss of the city manager, so should everything come to us? I think you're picking this here.
Okay, it was brought up
I'm good with that.
as it is.
No, with the change to city.
Okay, well, someone needs to then move the change. That's gonna happen. So let me get Councilperson Richardson's comment.
No, go on and finish that, because I have another.
Someone wanna make a motion for an amendment on that?
Are we gonna move everything?
So I think it was just an F and H, change chief of police to city manager. Was the suggestion I was hearing.
No, I'm just asking, there's been other edits that suggested that we're saying.
They have not been motioned
It's a
yet.
pleasure of the move on, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, they have not been motioned, they
Okay.
were thoughts and discussion, so I'm looking for motions. Do you want to make it this time, or pass it?
Okay, so I'll move to change the chief of police in F and H to city manager, to change residents in A, I mean citizens to residents in A, and wherever else it exists. And in 2.203 to change president to chair.
Just so I'm clear, you're changing it throughout, so this will be called the Residence Police Advisory Commission? I just don't want to do the wrong thing.
That's what your motion wants.
That's what she's moving.
Still finish the motion,
Okay, let me
so
know.
see if you want to take any of that.
If I could suggest to not alienate anybody, just take the front part of that off and just call it the Police Advisory Commission.
So,
I'm okay with that.
here's how I'm going to suggest you word it, you can say something
Thank you.
if it makes sense. So you want to change citizen to residents throughout, and in the identification of the commission itself is now called the Police Advisory.
Ypsilanti Police Advisory Commission.
Ypsilanti Police.
Ypsilanti Police Advisory.
But I think you need to change that throughout.
Yes, every reference to the commission would be the Ypsilanti Police
I
Advisory.
think it's pretty specific.
Is that what you want to do?
Yeah. Thank you. I so move.
Can we do those separately? I mean, they're totally.
It hasn't been seconded.
Okay, so that's moved by Councilmember Bashir, second by Councilmember Vogt.
The only thought that I just had, and I don't know, it just came in my head though, is that the police chief, when he was up there, said that you could have a third party file a complaint, you could have basically anyone could file a complaint. And so residents means residents of the city only, because anybody could file a
It
complaint?
doesn't
I
say
don't think that's
residents
changed.
complaint.
Oh, okay.
It says
Okay.
complaint.
Okay, just.
And it says
okay.
community police complaints. I think that the piece was a number in A in
Letter
particular,
A.
that it's, the relationship is between
Oh,
residents, who may or
okay.
may not be citizens of the city, and the police is a primary relational goal.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, like,
We're only
youth are
changing
not
citizens in the name, or taking
No,
it
she
out
was
in the
changing the
name.
word citizens elsewhere to residents.
And I worried that, my concern was that it was conflictual with, you know,
Could we use members
do
of the
not ask
community?
the immigration status taxation.
Could we use members of the community there? That way it encompasses everyone regardless. Maybe they don't, maybe they're not a permanent resident.
Members of the community.
That way, if it's a business person that's interested, but they're not necessarily a resident, they're not.
I think it gets dramatically
Cumbersome.
messy and cumbersome.
I think the spirit is.
I think the idea of just dropping the word citizens from the name probably is the cleanest.
Well, that's
Includes everybody.
It's twofold. We're changing citizens out of the name, and we're removing citizens and replacing with residents.
Elsewhere.
Yeah.
With that section A, that's in.
Is that the only one?
I don't know.
Okay, so that needs to be. Let's just cover bases.
So where is the only place you're talking about changing?
In 2.201, letter A.
We changed that.
To strengthen the relationship of citizens, I'm changing it to change the relationship between
The resident.
residents. Right.
Yeah, and that's the only one I've seen.
Okay, that's the one that.
What happens if we change that to community?
No.
The community of the city.
Gets those people that aren't citizens of this, blah, blah, blah.
It does, and we could have the Ypsilanti Community Police Advisory Division too. All right. I'm good with community as a friendly.
Okay, so you're friendly, Councilmember Vogt, you second the friendly.
So you're changing in
It's just this one.
201A, you're
Yeah.
changing citizens to community?
Yeah, that's the only one I'm seeing.
I support that.
Okay. So that has been friendly amended and agreed to, so the motion is on the table. People clear on what the amendments we've suggested are, you want me to restate them?
Read it out, read it out.
Yeah, so, strike basically citizens from the name Ypsilanti Police Advisory Commission. So instead of being Ypsilanti Citizens Police Advisory Commission, it's Ypsilanti Police Advisory Commission. In 2.201, section A, change the word citizens to community. In F and H in that same section, change police chief to city manager. In 2.203, B, change president to chair to be in line with how we describe our commissions. And those are the ones on the floor as of now. Although any time there's a reference to the title, that would change.
I'm not addressing Councilor Richardson's amendments because I don't know what language to use, so I just want to get these done.
Okay.
Then we can talk about her concerns.
Are there further discussions on this set of amendments? We can also, if on second reading it looks, if there's like a word that feels funny, we can do that kind of small amendments at second reading as well. Further conversation about this set of amendments? Hearing none, Deputy Clerk Blanket, can you please call the roll on this amendment, this set of amendments?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Murdoch? No. Councilmember Richardson?
No.
Councilmember Robb? No. Councilmember Vogt?
Yes.
Mayor Edmonds?
Yes.
Councilmember Bashir?
Yes.
4 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, so now we have an amended resolution. Are there further, Councilperson Richardson?
204D, regular meetings of the Ypsilanti Police Advisory Commission shall be held no less than quarterly. Of course, I've already judged that, but if it is what it is. Any scheduled meeting may be rescheduled at the preceding regular meeting, and that kind of limits the rescheduling. So, you say what?
The Open Meetings Act requires
that it has to be
if you have a
done.
regular meeting, you want to change to the next regular meeting, you have to do that at the regular meeting.
Okay, but there's sometimes that at
You can
the
call
meeting
special
today,
meeting.
you don't know that you're gonna need to reschedule. I mean, something comes up and you need to reschedule the meeting next week in between.
But for the open
I'm
meetings,
telling you, the Open Meetings Act tells you if you're going to change the adopted annual regular meeting schedule, you have to do that at an open meeting.
they could add a special meeting though. And they could schedule.
No, I'm talking about cancel it. I mean, you say you can cancel it without it being at the schedule.
I don't know, I have to look at that.
Okay, and that's all I'm saying, is that sometimes we don't know that we have a regular meeting today and we're meeting, but we don't know that we need to reschedule the meeting 2 weeks from now.
I think what I hear Mr. Shane
But
say.
I hear him saying that it's the Open Meetings Act, but how do we do that if it's absolutely necessary that the next meeting not be held or be rescheduled or what? I mean, does the Open Meetings Act allow for that change, or what do you do?
I have to research that.
Okay.
Sorry, I just don't know. I can do that before the second.
I understand that, but I mean, it's just, okay.
But we don't need to, in here, as it says what their base sort of meetings would be, we won't need to specify in here that they can call special meetings.
No, that's up to the pleasure of the body.
Okay,
I
are
mean,
there
assuming
further?
they would do a schedule, if it's quarterly, say, whatever those months are. The first Monday of each month.
Right.
And then if they needed to change it, they could change it, or they need to do a special meeting, they could do a special meeting.
Sorry, this conversation is reminding me of an amendment that I had made to the one that I proposed in the spring, but it didn't carry over. 2.204E and F. I would say shall be subject to the Freedom of Information Act, and shall be subject to the Open Meetings Act, as opposed to shall be public and.
What? What's the reason for that?
The reason for that is because there might be times when the
Oh.
don't meet in public, so it's subject to the Open Meetings Act, that covers the basis, I think, of the intent of council.
Wait now, your voice doesn't always carry. You're saying
So
that.
I'm saying, make the board subject to the open meeting. I can go.
The records of Ypsilanti Police Advisory Commission shall be subject
Correct.
to the Freedom
Of Information Act.
and
The next one, F, saying the Police Advisory Commission shall be subject to the Open Meetings Act. Again, that's the pleasure of council, but, and it may be nitpicky.
Take the word public out.
so don't they have to be public meetings?
And they would be under the Open Meetings Act, but I'm trying to reduce redundancy.
So it's not necessary additional words.
Correct.
Oh, gotcha.
But the records are gonna be subject to the.
Correct. And I'm not saying that they shan't, but I'm saying that it's redundancy that could get us into issues down the road.
Got it, okay, thank you. Okay, are there any,
We're taking out public, but they are public.
yes, yeah. So that's more like editorial error versus a change of any intent or anything.
Correct. And I'm trying to maintain an intent.
Okay, are there further amendments? To me, that would be a change you could make between the first and second reading.
Sure.
As a, change spelling and other things like that. Are there any additional amendments? Seeing none, Deputy Clerk Kalanga, can you please call the roll on the amended resolution?
Councilmember Rob,
This is the full thing as we
Councilmember Richardson,
Yeah.
Councilmember Rob. Yes. Councilmember Vogt.
Yes.
Mayor Edmonds.
Yes.
Councilmember Bashir.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
7 yes, the motion carries.
Great, thank you. It's been a long road. Councilmember Bashir, do you have anything?
I do. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the following items be approved. Resolution number 2017-233, approving traffic control order number 2017-09 to place no parking 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. signs on both sides of the driveway for dirt lot on South Grove by the border-to-border trail. 2, resolution number 207-234, approving traffic control order number 2017-10 to install reserved parking handicapped sign and blue stripe symbol on pavement in front of 824 Harriet Street. 3, resolution number 207-235, postponing the approval of the purchase agreement with Norfolk for 220 North Park. 4, resolution number 207-241, approving the fireworks display permit for Ace Pyro LLC on behalf of Eastern Michigan University Athletic Department. And 5, resolution number 2017-242, reappointing John Gilbreth as Chief AHB Hearing Officer. And I so move.
So moved by Councilmember Bashir. Support. Supported by Mayor Pro Tem Brown. Please call the roll on the consent agenda.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Rob. Yes. Councilmember Vogt.
Yes.
Mayor Edmonds.
Yes.
Councilmember Bashir.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Murdoch.
Yes.
7 yes, the motion carries.
Thank you. Councilmember Bashir, you're also the next resolution, please.
That the following individuals be appointed to the City of Ypsilanti Boards and Commissions as indicated below. Amanda Marshall to Parks and Recreation Commission.
We need to,
Oh, I'm sorry. I need to move to remove this nomination from the table and put it just off the table. Is that what I do? Okay, thank you. Off the table.
Okay, that's moved by Councilmember Bashir.
support.
Supported by Councilmember Murdoch.
Now, I move that the following individual be appointed to the City of Ypsilanti Boards and Commissions as indicated. Amanda Marshall to Parks and Recreation Commission.
So moved by Councilmember Bashir.
We're going to vote on the reconsideration.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
You haven't even. Clerk Lang, can you please vote on the reconsideration of the item on the table?
Councilmember Rob. Councilmember Vogt. Mayor Evans.
Yes.
Councilmember Bashir.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Murdock.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
So what are we voting on?
Taking it off the table, to take action on it.
Appointment off the table.
To take it off?
It was tabled in the
In order to
previous meeting.
consider it, it was tabled, now you can consider it.
Okay. Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Okay, okay.
I'll eventually get this right. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the following individual be appointed to the City of Ypsilanti Board and Commission as indicated. Amanda Marshall to Parks and Recreation Commission.
So moved by Councilmember Bashir, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Brown. Andrew, the term expiration says today.
Yes.
No, it says 10,
Yeah, you had the old.
Oh, I have the old one, so it got updated from the packet. Okay.
So
no,
what
it is
should it be?
2020.
10/17/2020. Discussion?
Yes. In reading her resume and all, I think that her skill set really match better with another commission, one of our other commissions, rather than, it seems like we're kind of wasting her expertise and her skills, putting her on the Parks and Recreation Commission.
I met with her.
You know, and I mean, and reading what she said, she was open to other commissions. So I'm thinking that rather than appoint her to Parks and Recreation at this time, that we just wait and appoint her to something where we can really use her abilities and her skills.
I met with her, she was interested in Parks and Recreation. She's
Fine.
There's a waiting list, like 20 people long for people on sustainability commission.
That's what
so
she
it has to
wants,
be a huge-
or, you know.
A huge one, so that's what I'm putting forward at this time, we can decide.
I just think that if people are willing to be on boards and commissions, we need to put them where we can use their abilities and their skills better, but if that's, you know.
Yeah, any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk Lang, please call the roll.
Councilmember Vogt.
Yes.
Mayor Edmonds.
Yes.
Councilmember Bashir.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Murdock.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Robb.
Yes.
7 yes, the motion carries.
Thank you. Councilmember Bochu, next resolution 2017-23736.
Move to extend. For 11 p.m.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Brown, second by Councilmember Vogt. All in favor, say aye.
2017-236, resolution approving escrow agreement with Fidelity National Title. It is resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the certain escrow agreement with Fidelity National Title, copy attached, is hereby approved, and the city manager is authorized to sign the same subject to the approval of the city attorney. So moved.
Supported by Councilmember Vogt, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
So as council is aware, we've approved a purchase agreement for the International Village sale of the Water Street site on September 18th. That purchase agreement provided for what's called an earnest money deposit. The purpose of an earnest money deposit is to essentially, in this instance, provide consideration to the city for removing a property off of the market. $10,000 of that EMD is essentially non-refundable in that if the purchase agreement is terminated at the election of the purchaser under contingency, or if we don't execute a development agreement, then $10,000 is retained by the city. So the escrow agent requires execution of this agreement in order to retain that EMD.
Questions or comments for council? Councilmember Murdock?
Says they're gonna deposit 5,000 every 30 days.
Yep.
When did that start?
They've already got, the escrow agent already has the $5,000 for the previous month. And they're waiting on execution of this.
Next.
But it's due the 20th of every month?
I have to look.
Okay, so what's the limit? You mentioned 10,000, so they're gonna deposit 5,000, maybe 5,000 deposits?
Nope, there is no limit, it's $5,000 every 30 days as long as.
Until we
close.
Until we close, okay. And it's non-refundable?
Or it's terminated. No, the whole thing is non-refundable. $10,000 of it is retained by the city if it's.
Only 10?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or it might be half. I have to look at the English.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I believe clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Edmonds,
Yes.
Councilmember Bashir,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown, Councilmember Murdock,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Rob,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogt.
Yes.
7 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, Councilmember Murdock, you've got the new resolution coming up next, 2017-240.
Yes. Whereas the International Village is the largest development the city has considered in our history, and whereas the International Village potential is significant to both help or harm our city, depending on the outcomes of negotiations, whereas there have been only 2 meetings and no updates regarding this development since it was first presented to council, and whereas council represents the voice of the citizens of Ypsilanti, their values, hopes, and concerns, and whereas council will be held responsible for the outcomes of the International Village process, negotiation, and outcomes, and whereas council needs more information about the ongoing process of negotiation to properly represent our constituents, and whereas staff has not responded to requests for updates and news regarding the process with the developer, and therefore be it resolved that a written report on the progress of the negotiations with the International Village be issued weekly, and further be it resolved that a place on the city council agenda under presentations, either in open or closed session if permissible, be dedicated to a discussion and questions and answers about the International Village proposal. And further resolved that the council requests a full report be presented giving the background of the developer of International Village LLC that will include history of other developments and the date status of their investment and investor status. And therefore be it further resolved that any proposed development agreement with International Village be scheduled for the city council meeting with a public hearing at which no vote will be taken. And therefore further resolved that any brownfield plan or other financial incentive that the city may grant be scheduled for a city council meeting with a public hearing at which no vote will be taken, and I so move.
So moved by Councilmember Murdock, supported by Councilperson Richardson. Please explain anything further?
Just clearly that the process that we've been using for this development has been flawed, that it's clear that the information flow hasn't been adequate, neither the council nor the public has been, I think, appropriately informed about this process, and we need to basically get a handle on this process and get control of our own process, and that's what we're hoping to do with this resolution.
So I want to ask the city manager, my only question about it is whether it makes sense to always be in presentations. You know, it's before public hearings and other things where often we have a large audience of people. Does it make sense to always be at that point in the agenda or to not specify that? I'm not saying it should always be at the end of the agenda, et cetera, but.
I think at any given meeting, we can change the agenda like we do. If it looks like it's not going to fit, there's a million things on the agenda, we can move it in the back. I just thought it should be a presentation, be part of presentations, you know, in the abstract.
Got it, okay. Any further discussion?
I'd be curious what staff has, any comments on this?
I have no comments, Councilman.
having just seen this today, I don't have much comment or concern other than I think, as I suggested earlier, I would suggest that we consider working sessions. And we could, as that is a regular public meeting, we could do public hearings at which no votes are taken at working sessions, which I think would be more productive and allow us to get through more material. You know, there's been several things on the agenda. There's several things I know coming forward for agendas, and I think it would be productive to create either bi-weekly or once a month work sessions to be able to, you know, go through this information.
The city council meeting term is generic. You know, we can work sessions, I don't care when it particularly happens. You know, we can schedule those specific meetings to deal with this issue without having the pressure of we got to vote tonight kind of thing. That's what I'm trying to avoid. But I also want some availability at those work sessions, city council meetings to have some kind of public input in it. Then we have some time to the next meeting when we want action to kind of digest the presentation and then the public's comments and whatever we get afterwards. That's the point of that. So, you know, I'm not...
I think we're talking, you know, very similar. Yeah. You know, I think I know council has done working sessions in the past, but I've worked in other communities when you have things of this magnitude where, you know, you can dedicate an entire meeting to a subject matter easier at a working session where there is no pressure to vote, but there is ample time, and you can also change your rules for public comment, you know, to create a better comment period than maybe we've been doing.
I hear you all saying the same thing. You know, you're just using different terms. I think I hear the exact same thing, you know. He's calling a council session meeting and you're calling a work session, so it's, but if you read what's here, I hear the exact same thing.
But there may be times, you know, when there won't be much to present. You know, I mean,
correct, and that's,
we didn't
you
meet
know,
with anybody this week, so, you know, or whatever.
right, and I wouldn't propose a weekly working session. I mean, the working session, as I kind of proposed earlier, would have topics.
I mean, my whole point of this is keep us informed on a regular basis of the status and what's going on, and present some format for when we're getting to decision making, that we have some opportunity to have a discussion of that without basically saying, you know, 12:30 at night, we gotta pass this, you know. We really don't want to do that much. And have other people have public opportunity to do that. I mean, but that's the point of this. I didn't realize you were going to propose work sessions. I didn't know your presentation, what it was going to be and what you were going to say.
Yep.
There was some interesting things in there. You know, I wish we might have known back on the 18th. But we'll get to that.
Wasn't asked to provide that.
Huh?
Okay,
I wasn't asked to provide.
Councilmember Murdoch, so would you be intent, just to clarify, so Ms. Ernest suggested working sessions. You think that under this fourth from the bottom, therefore, that could count? If there was a working session, would you expect there to also be an item on, say, the council meeting that was also that week or the next week? I get the intent of it and agree with the intent. I'm going to make sure we have language that clarifies.
No, I don't make a difference. I mean, they're all council meetings to me. You know, some of them work sessions.
But you mean every, I mean, you said dedicated place, so you mean every meeting has that place?
I think we should get a report of some sort, even if this says we don't have anything to report. We'll move on. If there's a lot of stuff to report, it might be longer, might want to move it to a different place on the agenda. I just want this continual information flow that we haven't seemed to be getting.
I agree. And I think the idea of a work session, what the work sessions are going to be incredibly helpful, but if there's something to report about another area that we're not covering in that work session, we still want to report it. Okay, so, and the idea is that it became really clear at when we were working on the purchase agreement that we got that at the last minute, that's not tolerable. We have to know more on an ongoing basis for something this large.
Okay, further comments? Hearing none, clerk, please, deputy clerk, please.
Councilmember Bashir?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Murdoch?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Robb? Councilmember Vogt?
Yes.
Mayor Edmonds?
Yes.
7 yes, the motion carries.
Next up, Councilmember Murdoch.
I think I passed my sustainability stuff to
Oh,
the liaison.
Not to me.
Oh, to you, okay.
Which one is first? I got confused now.
238 is first?
Okay, gotcha. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the City of Ypsilanti Sustainability Commission was created by ordinance of the City Council on January 24th, 2017, to create a model of sustainability for our community, prepare a sustainability plan, and prioritize sustainability policies, among other tasks. And whereas to undertake its responsibilities delegated to it by ordinance, the Sustainability Commission must work with clear direction from the City Council, including an approved working definition of the term sustainability as its meaning is to be applied to the City of Ypsilanti. And whereas the Sustainability Commission prepared and approved for recommendation to the City Council a proposed working definition of sustainability, now therefore be it resolved that the City of Ypsilanti, by the City of Ypsilanti, that the following working definition of the term sustainability as recommended by the Ypsilanti Sustainability Commission is hereby approved to guide the work of the Commission. Sustainability: achieving a balance of ecological, social, and economic considerations to provide for an equitable path for the growth and improvement of our community in the uses of our resources, remaining conscious of the historical context while ensuring the availability and vitality of those resources for further generations, and I so move.
Moved by Councilmember Bashir. Second by Councilmember Vogt.
Would we like to have Chairman Michalowski come up and talk about it for a second?
What's up? Good evening.
Evening, Keith Michalowski, Fortin Maple, Chairman of the Sustainability Commission. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and staff. As a Sustainability Commission, our view of the world is the long view, the structured view, the planning view, and the goal is to shape the future. We feel this is a good definition, and well, honestly, I would like to invite our committee chair up here to answer any questions you may have about this. Tom Kovacs. I was hoping you could give them a feel of what brought you guys to this point.
Sure. Mayor, council members, staff, public. So sustainability, there's many definitions of sustainability that I've noticed in my readings. And we felt that it was necessary to come to an agreement on what the definition that we were going to work with. Since we are the Sustainability Commission, we would like to know what we're the commission of, and so that we are all on the same page. We've settled after a discussion with the public and with the commission on the definition that you see in front of you. I just want to mention the beginning part. There's certain commonalities in all sustainability definitions, and one of the biggest is the balance of ecological, social, and economic considerations. There was a analogy that was given at one of our meetings where you have a three-legged stool, and if one of those legs is missing, you are unbalanced. And so sustainability is truly a balance between those three legs. And of course, the very end is on maintaining, ensuring the availability and vitality of resources for the future generations. That's also common across most definitions of sustainability.
Thank you. Discussion in the council? I'm not asking to propose a wordsmithing, and this is a great thing to come before us to support it, is in the sustainability world, resilience is becoming more and more of a term, a framing, et cetera, around this work. And so I want to talk to the commission about that in general as well. But I think as we see, particularly in looking at the acute impacts of climate change that we are seeing so prevalent at this time, that resilience framing is becoming more and more appropriate. So I'm not suggesting any change, but just sort of noting that as one of the newer terminologies that in my reading resilience plans from cities around the world is resilience has, the resilience framework has time boundaries in it, in a way a little beyond the ensuring availability for future generations, but it's about both the ability of communities to respond to acute crisis and chronic stresses. And so I think that's an interesting new dimension that often that hasn't been as much part of the sustainability kind of framework, and is feeling in our world today more and more relevant. So just sort of a note about where I see some of the framing transforming into. And I'm seeing that communities have who are doing resilience plans, and their climate action plan is like one of the sub-plans, and some of their other sustainability and even economic development plans, et cetera, are kind of sub-plans within the framework. So just a point of information. Conversation from council.
I just want to say that it's really a pleasure to work with the Sustainability Commission, and there's the energy, the drive, and the level of knowledge that's in that room is really amazing and wonderful. And I see them putting in place, starting with keystones, and this particular definition, one of the keystones that we're seeing, and it's they're just a ball of fire. So I would expect a lot of exciting proposals to come out of there, but mostly just I see this as one of the cornerstones of the work that they're starting. It's been being a real joy.
Seeing another Deputy Clerk Collier, can you please call the roll on the acceptance of a working definition of sustainability for the Sustainability Commission?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Murdoch?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Robb?
Yes.
Councilmember Vogt?
Yes.
Mayor Edmonds?
Yes.
Councilmember Bashir?
Yes.
7 yes, the motion carries.
Well, pass along yourself for your next one. You as well?
Yeah, well,
Go for it.
it's my team. It's my team. All right, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the City of Ypsilanti Sustainability Commission was created by ordinance of the City Council on January 24th, 2017, to create a model of sustainability for our community, prepare a sustainability plan, and prioritize sustainability policies, among other tasks. And whereas the Sustainability Commission has prepared recommendations for the City Council to ensure all development within the city is sustainable development and is consistent with the working definition of sustainability approved by the Commission and the City Council. And whereas the City Attorney has expressed concern regarding the legality of some of the proposed regulations for sustainable development presented by the Commission, now therefore be resolved that the City of Ypsilanti, by the City of Ypsilanti, that the City Council hereby schedules the recommendation from the Sustainability Commission for establishment of certain requirements for sustainable development for further consideration at its November 9th, 2017 regular meeting to address legal and other staff concerns and to provide direction to the Commission on any change to the requirements that may be desired by the City Council. And I so move.
So moved by Councilmember Bashir,
I'll support that.
supported by
There's a lot of
Councilmember
questions,
Murdoch.
and I think
No, I haven't changed. Instead of November 9th, since I don't think we're going to be meeting November 9th,
oh yeah.
we might want to say first meeting in November.
Yeah, let's just make that as a
Or have it, whichever.
friend, okay, that's friendly, you're seconding it, good,
Yeah.
okay. So noted. First November meeting. Okay, Chair, Keith, do you wanna say anything more to us about this, or we can discuss amongst our, we have before us the resolution in the packet?
I don't have anything extra at this time. I don't know if you have any questions,
Okay, and Mr. McCleary, do you wanna say anything, or you prepared the memo?
Your Honor, I just want to note the concerns that were provided to you by the city attorney's office regarding a couple of the recommendations and the attorney's findings that the city council may not have authority to require a couple of those items. And I don't know if the city attorney wants to elaborate any further on the memo that they provided, but we need to keep that in mind as we decide how we move forward on this.
Okay. Okay, I'll start with
No. Explain what you were saying. You're saying that we might not be able to hold them to this. Please help me understand.
Sure. So, and my only reading is the kind of summary in the memo in front of you. But this last bit here, second to last bit, property tax relief and rent protection for low income and retirement age residents. So there's two concerns there. One is the state sets the taxes, and so they give us a little bit of leeway to grab some sort of relief, but it has to operate within statute. And secondly, and I think council knows this, is that rent control is barred by statute.
Right.
So, and I have some drafting concerns with kind of how this is put together. For instance, if you were to read it verbatim, it would say, meet the following requirements, solar energy. I don't know what that means. So I think it's good to work off of, but we're going to need some direction.
Yeah, I would say in general, I'm excited about this and about it, moving in general, but at this time, this is a big point of discussion, and that I think this is actually good to look at to have a working session actually around this. There's of course questions for staff of what does this apply to, not apply to, what are some of the best practices? I'd love to see some of the best practices and what's on their list, or is it recommendations, or is it, to me there's a broad set of questions around it, and I'd love to dive into those actually really soon. I don't know if we can do that by the first meeting in November, but I'd love that to be a priority working session for us to understand more.
Well, I also, think that this, kind of dovetails with the conversation that council's having about CBO and any CBA that we have with, the International Village. And so, at the very least, it gives the Sustainability Commission's kind of perspective on what priorities are from a sustainability perspective, which covers a lot of the needs of the community. And so, I'm not entirely surprised that the list needs tweaking and attention and things like that, but I also think that it's both redundant and supportive of other work going on at the city council level. So.
Other comments from council? So my note was, I don't think this is because there's a lot of questions, it's like the start of a conversation, but it's not something I would feel actually comfortable voting on right now, but I'd love to define right now what our next step could be to really dive into this. Some of those questions, just to put them out there, are any development in the city. This body doesn't have authority over most developments in the city. So what does that mean? Is it something that goes into planning commission guidelines? Are some of these things recommendations that go into the master plan and the zoning update? Like, I think we need the time to understand where some of these fit and where they would fit from a policy perspective, and then who they would apply to. So those are some broad questions staff would need to look at and understand, because this body is rarely looking at those sort of things or has any authority over that approval.
Maybe we can send, maybe council can, we could not table, but postpone this discussion, because I think that what we're hearing is that there's so many questions that this raises, and both legal and also procedural and how it overlaps with other commissions, that maybe we need to assemble a list of questions and send them to the Sustainability Commission and have them kind of look at it, you know?
Oh, I think there's gonna be both questions for the commission, but there's gonna be questions for our staff
Yeah.
in particular and legal. You know, the commission may be able to help us research other best practices, you know, for how these have been incorporated and help bring some of that forward. Staff will have more.
As opposed to, because essentially you'd be postponing on a resolution to consider something at the next meeting, so you might just revise the language to say at a meeting to be held no later than, or something, I don't know. Or you might just change the directive to not discuss it at a meeting.
About, okay, before I,
Do you understand? Because
Yeah.
resolution for the next meeting.
okay. I have a, well, okay, I have to make a proposal and then we can discuss, right? So, maybe I would propose that we would, set this aside until, or postpone it until the second meeting in December. And that would give
So
the
I would just change the
Sustainability
date.
Commission 2 meetings to look at these questions.
I would just change the date here before the end of the year.
Oh, okay, before the end of the
Does
year.
that make sense?
Yeah, and then that would give the Sustainability Commission potentially 2 meetings to go over these questions and, you know, and then also, but I also, so let's put that out there, that's a postponing motion, revised. Second.
Is there a second? Supported, an amendment to change the date to end of the year, basically?
Yeah.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem.
My suggestion is going to be somewhat similar, it's going to be back to the sustainable.
Yeah.
Committee to, you know, to look at the items that are being raised and, you know, revised if necessary their recommendations.
City Manager McCleary, do you have any thoughts on this?
Are you going to prepare your questions tonight? And
Hopefully not.
because my intent when I drafted the resolution was that you would take this information under consideration, and then at your next meeting in November, you would discuss any questions you have, and potentially at that meeting remand it to the Sustainability Commission for further discussion and work.
Okay.
So if we vote on this with the amendment that's on the floor, if that amendment passed, we vote on this, that the council has till the end of the year, instead of November 9th, we're not voting on this list or this, et cetera. Okay, just provide that clarity. We're voting on, this is a suggested starting point to move and get something in place by the end of the year.
We have legal and other questions about it, right?
Yeah, and I would, that city manager's input makes sense. Essentially, which meeting do you want to discuss what further information you need? So if you push that out to the end of the year.
So I'll send out a request for questions related to this to council and staff and assemble them for the Sustainability Commission. No?
Questions from staff?
Well,
For staff.
I mean, this is related to development. Okay, so I think the city manager and the economic developer are going to have questions about it.
And there's also gonna be questions for those parties as well as yourself.
Right.
Everyone put their questions on the table, is what she's saying, she will collect. And I think it may behoove us to do a working session once we get that, you know, do it at a separate time where we can really focus. We don't need to define that in here.
I mean, I mean, we're just in discussion, but I really think this dovetails with the CBO.
Right, it may be a working
Yeah.
session about, it may be a
Yeah.
joint working session about that, for instance, because that's something we expect to come back up in the next couple of months, for instance.
Some of it goes beyond the CBO, and it just seems to me that some of the questions that came up in terms of these zoning questions or these whatever questions, we're gonna need some staff input on that. Maybe not just our questions. At some point, obviously, staff is inundated with a lot of stuff. And I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, just us preparing a bunch of questions may not quite do it.
Right now, the amendment on the floor is to basically change the date by which we have brought this back, Q&A, come up with something, adopt it by the end of the year. That is what the amendment on the floor is. Is there any further discussion on that amendment? Hearing none, Deputy Clerk Colon, please call the roll.
Councilmember Murdoch,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Rob,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogt,
Yes.
Mayor Edmonds,
Yes.
Councilmember Bashir,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Okay, and this is now, we have an amended resolution. Is there further discussion on the amended resolution? Hearing none?
That was
Hearing none, Deputy Clerk Schlegel, can you please call the roll on the resolution as amended?
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Rob,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogt,
Yes.
Mayor Edmonds,
Yes.
Councilmember Bashir,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Rob. Murdoch, I apologize.
What you gonna give Rob to, huh? Yes.
7 yes, the motion carries.
Thank you. Our next resolution was added, and that was about changing the dates of the regular November meetings. Want to remove that for election and 14th of January. I mean, it was you, but you said, keep
Okay.
going.
Yeah, so I move that we reschedule November meetings to, because of the election, to November 14th and 28th.
Moved by Councilperson Bashir, supported by Councilmember Murdoch. So we checked with everyone, those date works, stays on Tuesdays, it just moves it by week since the election was not a regularly scheduled election. We didn't know that was calendar. 14th and 28th. Yep. It also means there's no meeting the week of Thanksgiving, which is what the meeting was.
You're saying you're moving them to?
It was the 7th and the 21st are our regularly scheduled meetings, and so moving them to the 14th and the 28th instead. So we'll go forward by a week. Further discussion? Mr. Lang, you can please call the roll and change the resolution.
Councilmember Rob,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogt,
Yes.
Mayor Edmonds,
Yes.
Councilmember Bashir,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Murdoch,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Okay, I think Mayor Pro Tem and I will recuse ourselves from the next conversation, so we're going to go and I'm going to give you 2 quick updates. The Economic Development Coordinating Committee we just got word today is being suspended at this time because of staffing changes and OCED and unclear federal funding for OCED related activities, etc. But Greg Dill, the county administrator, is presenting an economic development plan to the Board of Commissioners at a meeting this Wednesday or Thursday. I don't remember which of their meetings it's at. Unclear at this time what is, I haven't seen that plan, and unclear at this time what he is proposing, but Greg Dill is proposing an economic development way forward. So that will be interesting to understand. Secondly, the Housing Equity Leadership Team, we had a really, really super helpful presentation from Jennifer Hall all about vouchers and how they work in all of the ways, some changes that are happening, how the wait lists work, kind of the quantities, etc. We actually encourage her and OCD to like video record it because it's a really, really great understanding of how it works for instance, Housing Commission and Arbor Housing Commission, the MISHDA related vouchers, vouchers that are housing choice, that used to be called Section 8, how things are as projects. So there may be some policy recommendations that are coming that help us coming down the line, maybe in the next 6 months or so, from that committee to the different communities who are a part of this. Nothing really specific at this time, but we had a really, really helpful discussion and just great education. We may ask Jennifer to come to a meeting at some point, and then along with Zach from the Ypsi Housing Commission to do a shortened version of that presentation. Just really helpful to know how it all works, because there's a lot of different pretty complicated systems around vouchers, including how the wait lists work. Like for instance, people are often on you can be on a Section 8 basically wait list, as many as you want. So people are often on tons of wait lists all over the country, which is pretty interesting. So There's some ability to do some, to do preference for someone who's a local resident. There's some ability to transfer from other communities to here. There's a lot of interesting things. So just some really interesting learning. I'll pass along the kind of handout she gave us when I get them. But we'll have a, maybe a presentation or something at some point. Her as well. Okay, so I'll pass over here to you. And we'll introduce ourselves. Guys.
All right, so who has this agenda item?
No.
Give me a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
If you get some rest.
As long as the body is okay with whoever the chair is, it's fine. The body would like to appoint a chair.
I have no concern about this whatsoever. Whoever chairs this is part of the yeah. Would you like to chair this part of it?
Okay, so we're expecting a presentation from you.
I can present, I suppose.
Please.
So council's directed our office and the city manager to issue an RFP for special counsel to investigate this matter per the council's charter authority. That, I want to say that RFP went out the 5th, I think, and they were due last Friday. We received 6, yes.
Can I ask a question? There were others that were going to be part of this investigation that are still in the room. Is that?
That's just a public meeting.
Yeah, they can't vote. They can't
Okay,
vote.
all right, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I'm just point of order.
No problem. So we received 6, we accepted 6 bids that were timely received and sealed. There was one that was not accepted because it was both unsealed and not timely submitted. So I provided that, when did I send out the email? Saturday at some point? It's been in the packet. I have a summary provided in my RFL and an email that sent out the proposals. Did everybody get the memo, the RFL that I put out in conjunction? Okay, sorry. So take a look at that and let me know if you have any questions, I guess. Essentially,
so what was the decision-making process? Who was in on the discussions and
decisions as far as what?
Which you're recommending?
We are not recommending anyone. Which one, the RFL and the resolution, or the proposals? I sent the RFL and the resolution this afternoon because I didn't realize I had not got emailed. And I sent out the proposals Saturday afternoon, just before 3.
Okay, but you sent out something today.
Yes, this evening at, yeah. And I'm sorry, I thought that got sent out earlier and I was mistaken. And I can summarize essentially this, as council's aware, this investigation is up to the pleasure of council. Council can, council can select a bidder tonight and, we can get directed to enter into contract negotiations with 1 or 2 of them. We can request that one or two of them come in for interviews. Council can attempt to work with one of the special counsel to limit the scope, depending on how council feels about the previous hearings. I guess my guiding advice would be if council decides it has enough information to take no action, that would be when you don't hire a special counsel. And I do apologize for this getting laid out, but that's what happens when an RFP is due on Friday.
Yeah, I thought that was quite strange.
Well, it's as quick as we can get it out and get something back in.
It's the no internet is supposed to be out here.
I thought it was back. It was back on my cell phone.
Yeah. Is it back?
Yeah.
Is it that near midnight?
It was back for a while, yeah.
It wasn't until after 9 o'clock.
If, I don't know, if the council want to take a break and review everything?
I would recommend that.
Only reminder, she's the chair.
Councilman Lois, or sorry, Councilman Richardson, would it be advisable to take a break so that we can review the material?
Are those, are council members wanting to take a break? I hear one. You say, Councilman?
Why not?
Okay, let's break for, let's take a 10-minute break.
I'm gonna leave this here. There's a fair hard case law, and
I know, and I'm not able to.
Yes. Say what? The bid opening was Friday at 3 p.m.
Wait a minute.
That's not what I know that. That's not what I do. I know that.
Organization is not.
But there, we wouldn't have a proposal, we wouldn't even know what they said. So. Hello there, Marvin, how are you?
Pretty good as yourself.
I'm good. Need a friendly face.
Yeah, they're
taking a break. They're taking a break and then they're going to talk about the investigation.
Okay. Oh my God, where are we on the agenda? I just thought I'd check in. I was like,
We're
I'm in his comments.
We're pretty close to comments. So we are.
I have a picture.
Yeah, so we're right here. This was moved down here, so we've already gotten through most of the stuff. So we're down here. And then they're going to do the updates. Yeah, this is that's really quick. They already did that. So basically, if they already did that, yeah, we're almost at comments.
Okay.
Yeah, depending how long this is.
Yeah, but I'm only take some time at this part.
I'm good. I'm like, she is. Yeah, I'm just kind of gone.
Have you been up since then?
Yeah, I've been getting up
Really, I've been up since then.
Yeah. Not earlier than anyone else.